Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. We're rewinding time to the days of the medieval Crusades. You're not some heroic knight in shining armour, galloping across the plains with a fluttering banner and a perfectly groomed beard. No, you're just, you. You've joined the First Crusade probably because your local priest scared you into it, or because your cousin was going and you didn't want to seem like a coward. Either way, here you are, marching east with thousands of other hopeful and questionably prepared souls. You probably won't survive this, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I don't take it personally if you don't, but it does help this channel keep going, and while we're at it, what city are you listening from? And what time is it over there? I'm always curious. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Ugh. It's early fall 1096. The first chill has started creeping in at night. You're on a dusty road somewhere in the Balkans, days out from Constantinople, surrounded by chatter, clanking pots, and the occasional mooing of a cow someone inexplicably brought along. The road is nothing more than packed earth and scattered stones. There's no inn waiting for you at the end of the day. No warm tavern with roasted chicken and feather beds, just the dirt, your gear, and a deepening awareness that no one really explained what this journey would feel like. You've walked all day, your feet are throbbing, the leather soles of your boots have already begun to split. The people around you are a ragtag bunch, some with swords, some with nothing more than walking sticks and kitchen knives, and no one seems to know where they'll sleep tonight. The sun sets with almost theatrical drama, casting golden reds across the hills. You want to enjoy it, maybe say something poetic about the sky, but you're more concerned with whether you're going to freeze tonight. The moment the sun disappears, the temperature drops 10 degrees like the land itself sighed and gave up. There's a crude camp forming ahead. Fires are being lit slowly. Tents are going up, at least for those who brought tents. You did not bring a tent. To be fair, most people didn't. Tents are for the wealthy, the knights, the bishops, the highborn men who can afford extra baggage animals and retainers to set up camp for them. You've got a bedroll that smells like wet sheep and a half-rotten piece of canvas someone gave you back in France. That's your shelter tonight. You find a spot that isn't already claimed and set down your things. The ground is still warm from the sun, but it won't last. You try to build a small fire with damp wood, which smokes like a dying dragon and refuses to catch. Someone nearby takes pity on you and gestures you toward a larger campfire, where a dozen others are already huddling. This is where you learn your first real lesson of the Crusade. Warmth is communal. Forget personal space. You're going to sleep hip to hip with people who haven't bathed since Easter, who snore like pigs and probably stole something from your bag earlier. But you're not mad. You're just grateful. Because you can already feel the cold creeping through your boots and into your bones. That night, you try to sleep on your back, then your side, then curled in a ball. The stars are bright, mockingly so. Every muscle in your body aches. The fire has died down to coals. A dog has curled up next to your feet, offering a little warmth and a lot of fleas. You drift in and out of sleep, waking each time someone coughs, or rolls over, or accidentally elbows you in the ribs, and then it starts raining. It's not a downpour, just a steady, miserable drizzle that soaks through your cloak and dampens your only blanket. There's no way to stay dry unless you climb under someone else's blanket, and that comes with its own list of problems. The cold bites harder now. The fire sputters and dies. You pull your knees to your chest. Bury your head in your arms and tell yourself this is what holy suffering is supposed to feel like. And honestly, that's kind of part of the idea. The clergy told you that hardship purifies the soul, that marching east would earn you remission of sins, that every blister and frozen toe brings you closer to heaven. In the middle of the night, soaked, shivering, and smelling of goat, you start to wonder if that's just a nice way of saying good luck, sucker. Here's a historical fact to keep you grounded. During the early Crusades, especially the First Crusade, many crusaders were just ordinary peasants who had no military training and no idea how to survive nights in the open. They suffered badly in the early months, especially during the crossing of the Balkans, where food was scarce and shelter non-existent. A quirky bit of fringe trivia. Some groups actually believed angels would come down at night to protect crusaders as they slept. It was common to carry small tokens, scraps of parchment, bones, or stones said to ward off chill and nightmares. These would be tucked into boots or sewn into cloaks, not that they helped much when the temperature dropped below freezing. And of course, there's scholarly debate about just how organised these early crusading camps actually were. Some historians argue that the chroniclers exaggerated the suffering to make the survivors look more heroic. Others point to letters and journals that describe total chaos, men stealing food, burning towns for shelter, and abandoning the sick in ditches. Whether you believe the romantic version or the messier truth, one thing's clear: comfort was not part of the plan. You wake the next morning with a crick in your neck, frozen fingers, and a renewed sense of dread. And the worst part? You still have years of this ahead. The next night things don't improve much. You've walked another 12 miles, uphill for half of it, and your legs feel like damp logs. The group's pace has slowed, blisters, rolled ankles, broken wagon wheels. You pass a man whose foot is so swollen he's using his sword as a crutch and no one really stops to help him. Mercy is in short supply out here. Everyone's too tired, too cold, too hungry. You've begun to realise that surviving the nights is just as much a challenge as avoiding enemy swords. By dusk, the camp forms again, this time in a clearing by a narrow stream. Someone mutters it's probably poisoned, someone else drinks it anyway. Fires go up slowly again. You scavenge some kindling and try your hand at lighting a proper blaze this time. One of the older men shows you a trick. Stack the driest twigs like a pyramid, add a wad of old cloth soaked in animal fat, and use the flint underneath, not above. It sparks, smokes, and finally ignites. You feel an unreasonable sense of triumph. There's something primal about building fire in the wilderness. You feel closer to something ancient. But the fire solves only part of your problem. What about sleeping? What about the cold ground and the open sky, and the rising damp that seems to suck the heat right out of your bones? You try to make yourself a bedroll from your cloak, your pack, and a flattened pile of branches. It's miserable. The cloak is too short, the branches poke your back, and the smoke from the fire keeps drifting straight into your eyes. You scoot a little closer to the warmth and suddenly find yourself nearly pressed against a man who smells like dried fish and wood smoke. He doesn't even flinch. That's just how it is now. The buddy system develops naturally. No one tells you to do it. No one teaches it. But by the third night you understand, sleeping alone is for fools or nobles or people who want to freeze. You huddle up, you share warmth. It's awkward, yes, but you either press your thighs against a stranger or wake up with frostbite. Those are your options. Privacy was left behind somewhere in France. And the snores. Oh, the snores. Every kind of wheeze and honk and rattle imaginable. One man sounds like he's drowning in slow motion. Another talks in his sleep, rambling about roast goose and his mother's turnips. It should be unbearable. But you're so tired that even this strange concert of human misery becomes background noise. You drift off for a few minutes at a time, jolting awake when someone rolls over or accidentally elbows your spine. Your second real night on the road, and you still haven't slept more than a few hours in total. You start to see the change in the people around you too. The humour is fading, fewer jokes, less singing. People speak more quietly, if at all. And when they do speak, it is about food, or home, or what it'll be like to finally reach Jerusalem, like it's a dream and not a place. Here's a useful historical tidbit. Most early crusaders were completely unprepared for the rigours of travel. They weren't soldiers, they were villagers, bakers, smiths, and shepherds. They had no military discipline or experience in cold weather camping. This wasn't like setting up a tent in the backyard. This was survivalism with almost no gear, no planning, and no backup. Many simply followed others. Assuming someone else knew what they were doing, they didn't. And here's a weird lesser-known fact. Medieval people knew that sleeping too close to the ground could make you sick, but they didn't understand why. Some believed earth vapours rose up at night, poisoning the body through the skin. So a few tried to sleep elevated, on carts, on stones, or even by building little platforms from logs. Most of them gave up after falling off in their sleep. That night, while trying to find a position that doesn't end with a stick poking your hip bone, you remember something your uncle once said: "Comfort is for after death." You'd thought it was a joke. It's starting to feel more like a warning. Sometime around midnight a dog howls, not close but close enough. People stir, weapons get quietly unsheathed. The fear is real. You're not just at risk from cold and hunger out here. There are bandits, wolves, and worse. You spend an hour half awake, hand on your knife, blanket clutched to your chin. The howling fades. Nothing happens. But now your heart's racing and you're shivering again. The open sky above you is beautiful, though. Endless stars. No lanterns, no smoke, no city noise. You stare at it while your mind drifts. and for a moment, just one, you forget about the mud caked to your legs and the itch on your neck that's probably lice. You remember why you came, the promise of something greater, not just heaven, glory, escape, a story worth telling when, if you make it home. Back in camp, the fire is down to embers. Someone's muttering a prayer in Latin, a donkey farts, someone coughs a wet, phlegmy cough and it echoes in the silence. You pull your cloak tighter, roll onto your other side and pretend that rock under your rib is a pillow. The scholarly debate here is a fun one. Some historians argue that sleeping arrangements in Crusader camps were more structured than the chaos often described in popular history. They point to supply records, reports of tent inventories, and organised camp layouts, suggesting a degree of planning at least for higher-ranking groups. Others say that's optimistic at best and that rank-and-file soldiers, and certainly peasants, were left to fend for themselves, sleeping wherever there was space regardless of terrain or exposure. You're starting to believe the latter. By morning, your knees are stiff, your back is sore, and someone has definitely stolen half your bread. But you're alive, and that you're starting to realise is not something you can take for granted anymore. It doesn't take long before you start developing an appreciation, a reluctant, scratchy, begrudging appreciation for wool. Not the soft sweater kind your grandma knits, but the coarse, thick, unprocessed kind that itches and clings and smells vaguely like a livestock barn. And yet every night you wrap yourself in as much of it as you can find. Wool tunic, wool cloak, wool socks, if you're lucky. You've even stuffed a wool rag under your shirt like some desperate little heating pad. It's not glamorous, but it's better than losing a toe. At this point, you're sleeping in your clothes. Everyone is. Undressing at night is a luxury reserved for people with 4 walls and a roof. Out here, if you take off your boots, there's a decent chance you won't get them back on. Not because someone steals them, though that happens, but because your feet will swell or the leather will freeze into stiff, useless shapes by morning. You're beginning to recognise that gear in the medieval sense means whatever keeps the cold out. No one cares how you look anymore. A man walking around with 2 cloaks, a fur stole and a burlap sack tied around his head like a hat is suddenly the smartest guy in camp. You see others lining their clothes with moss or stuffing dried grass between layers. It's like everyone's becoming some kind of bushcraft gnome. The layering system develops quickly and by necessity. Undergarments of linen if you're rich. Over that wool, then another layer of wool, then a cloak. The more layers, the better. You hear talk of men sewing extra cloth into their breeches or using strips of torn blanket as makeshift scarves. Nobody minds looking ridiculous anymore. Looking warm is the new status symbol. And of course, you start noticing whose gear holds up and whose doesn't. The rich knights with their heavy cloaks and furs do all right, but most of them brought the wrong kind of things. Delicate fabrics meant for parades, not suitable silk-lined hoods, decorative embroidery, useless. Within a week, even the highborn are scavenging extra wool from dead men's packs. Yes, dead. Cold kills quietly out here, especially when someone gets sick, or wet, or just too exhausted to keep fighting for warmth. A lot of your sleep, now, happens in fragments. 30 minutes here, 10 there. You learn to nod off at campfires, leanings on someone's shoulder. You wake when the wind cuts through your blanket, or when your face starts to go numb. One night you fall asleep with your boots on and wake up to find one half buried in frost. Not snow, just frost. But it's enough to freeze the leather stiff and make every step feel like you're walking on planks. And yet, there's a strange camaraderie in it all. Around the fires at night, you swap tricks. One man shows you how to ball up your cloak and tuck it under your armpits for a maximum heat retention. Another teaches you how to warm a rock in the fire, wrap it in cloth, and slip it into your bedding like a medieval hot water bottle. It burns your hand the first time you try it, but it does keep your ribs warm for hours. Here's a fact to file away. Medieval wool wasn't soft, it was dense, lanolin-rich, and practically waterproof. Peasants and soldiers favoured it not for comfort, but for durability and insulation. It could trap heat even when damp, making it ideal for sleeping outdoors in unpredictable weather. And here's your weird fringe tidbit of the night. Some crusaders believed that lice, yes, actual lice, helped keep you warm. Not because they generated heat, they don't, but because having lice meant you were still alive and generating enough body heat to support them. Morbid? Yes. Comforting? Weirdly, also yes. If you had lice, at least you weren't dead yet. You try not to think about that one too hard as you pick at the itch on your scalp. But all the wool in the world can't make up for the real enemy. The ground. The cruel, cold, unyielding ground. No mattress, no padding, no insulation. Just dirt. Dirt that leaches heat from your body all night long. By now, you've learned to look for pine needles, leaves, anything soft and dry you can scrape into a pile before lying down. Sometimes you get lucky and find moss. Sometimes you just lie directly on stones and try to pretend they're warm. There's some debate among scholars about how much natural insulation medieval soldiers actually used. Some believe they relied heavily on straw leaves, even animal dung, to form barriers between themselves and the ground. Others argue that with large groups moving quickly, there just wasn't time to construct elaborate bedding each night. More often than not, the decision came down to time, weather, and sheer exhaustion. Would you rather scavenge for pine needles in the dark or collapse and hope for the best? You're beginning to understand why so many people didn't make it past the first few months of the journey. Still, you keep going. Your body is changing. Leaner, harder, more accustomed to discomfort. You start to fall asleep more quickly, even when cold. Your brain gives up the fight. Sleep becomes more of a survival function than a luxury. You don't even dream anymore. Just blankness. A warm, black hole. And then the sun's up, someone's kicking your feet, and it's time to march again. There are whispers in camp that the weather will get worse as you go east. Colder nights, thinner air, some talk about the mountains. You don't know where these mountains are or when you'll reach them, but you're already dreading it. If this is what early autumn feels like, what will winter be? You're starting to understand something simple and brutal. Surviving the night isn't about comfort, it's about improvisation. It's about what you can scrounge, who you can sleep next to, and how fast you can adjust before the next cold front rolls in. You lie there one night, curled in your wool cocoon, listening to the slow crunch of footsteps from a watchman nearby. A baby cries softly in the distance. Yes, some people brought entire families. A man murmurs a prayer. Someone's coughing again. And you think briefly about home, about a real bed, about waking up warm. But that memory feels slippery now, like something you might have dreamed once. You can't quite hold on to it. You knew tents existed before this journey. Who hasn't seen one at a festival or a fair? But it's only now, as the cold deepens and the ground hardens beneath you each night, that tents start to feel like symbols of class division, more than simple tools for shelter. They rise up in the distance at every campsite like little cities of canvas and privilege, their conical tops swaying gently in the wind while you, once again, stake out a patch of dirt with a rock for a pillow. If you're lucky, you might get invited into one. Not because anyone feels generous. No, generosity out here is rarer than soap. It usually happens when someone wants something. A task, a favour, maybe just the comfort of extra company after a hard day. But mostly the tents remain off limits to you and the rest of the trudging horde. There are all kinds, you notice. The small modest ones belonging to minor knights, just big enough for a man and maybe his squire. Then there are the elaborate ones, almost portable pavilions brought by wealthier lords or bishops, constructed with thick canvas walls, sometimes dyed with bright stripes or even painted with family crests. Inside, they're warm, almost scandalously so, thanks to thick rugs, fur bedding, and braziers for heat. You see one lord's tent from a distance, and a servant ducks out carrying a steaming bowl of soup. You don't know whether to cry or punch something. Your group, the common foot soldiers, pilgrims, and tagalongs, form the ragged outer circle of the camp, sleeping in the mud like discarded baggage. There's no central planning, no layout map. You just find a bit of ground that isn't already taken or drenched in urine. The rich camp in the centre, in neat rows. The rest of you sprawl like dropped coins. You tried to build your own tent once. One evening, after watching a merchant string his canvas between two trees, you decided to copy him using your blanket, a spare rope, and a bent spear. It collapsed twice, then caught fire when a spark from your cooking fire landed on the edge. You gave up and just huddled beneath it, damp and defeated, whispering curses into the wind. Historical fact time, contrary to popular belief, not every crusader had access to a proper tent. While the wealthier participants travelled with their elaborate setups and even portable furniture, most ordinary crusaders had little more than cloaks and bedrolls. Tents were expensive, heavy, and required extra pack animals. That meant only the well-funded, nobility, military orders, and clergy could afford them. Everyone else slept in the open or under makeshift shelters. But here's a stranger little fact. Some wealthier knights didn't just have tents, they had entire camp teams with them. Servants to pitch the tent, cooks to prepare hot meals, and even scribes to record events. There are documented accounts of some crusaders travelling with tapestries to hang inside their tents, portable chests for books, and specially carved beds that disassembled for travel. Imagine that, sleeping on a feather mattress in the middle of a freezing wasteland, while your neighbours die of exposure 10 feet away. And yet, despite the resentment it breeds, there's an odd benefit to these luxurious tents. They act as beacons. If someone's tent is glowing warmly from within, you know there's a fire inside, and if there's a fire, there's heat. And if there's heat, well, sometimes desperate people make desperate choices. You hear stories of men sneaking up to noble tents and lying as close to the walls as they can, just to absorb a sliver of warmth through the canvas. Some get away with it. Some get beaten half to death. Your own sleeping situation has evolved from patch of dirt to barely functional nest. You've dug a shallow impression in the ground where your hips naturally fall. You've scavenged old branches to prop up the ragged canvas you still carry. It's not a tent, it's more like a fabric lean-to, but it holds off the wind if you lie just right. You've learned to place your shoes upside down on a stick near the fire, so they dry instead of freezing. Every small trick is a little victory. But then there's the issue of wind. You wouldn't have thought something invisible could cause such misery. It howls through camp at night, pulling at blankets, sending embers flying and slicing through even the thickest wool like knives. You wake up some mornings with your cloak wrapped around your head and your legs bare, the wind having robbed you of even that sad barrier. Debate time. Historians don't fully agree on the distribution and use of tents during the Crusades. Some records suggest that by later campaigns, logistics had improved, and even common soldiers had access to basic shelter. Others insist that proper tents remained rare luxuries throughout, and that most of the rank and file suffered through the elements with minimal cover. Given the survival rates and the written complaints in many chronicles, it's fair to assume most slept rough. But let's be real, it's not just about cold and comfort, it's about dignity. You start to feel like a ghost, haunting these camps, moving through fog and firelight half-human by morning. Your skin itches constantly, your fingers are cracked and raw, you haven't been dry in days. And every time you see those tents, their neat seams, the warm shadows moving inside, you feel like a kid with his face pressed to a bakery window, starving. You start fantasizing about owning a tent yourself. Not even a good one. Just something that doesn't leak. Something that lets you sit up. You think about what colour you'd make it. You think about sewing patterns into the flaps. Maybe something from your village crest. The dream is foolish, but it gives you something to hold on to while your boots steam by the fire. One night a storm hits. Not rain, wind and cold. A brutal front that tears through camp like an invisible army. Your lean-to is gone in seconds. You clutch your cloak and drop to the ground, curling around your pack like a beetle. Tents are flapping wildly. One even blows away entirely, tumbling into the darkness with someone still inside. People shout, scramble, grab at ropes. You hear something snap, and then, just like that, the storm passes. In the silence afterward, you lie there, soaked, trembling, a piece of cloth over your face, heart thudding from cold and panic. You think, not for the first time, about turning back, but there's nowhere to go, only forward, toward Jerusalem, or whatever's left of you when you get there. You learn, over time, that warmth is not something you find alone out here. It's something you steal, borrowed from the body next to you, shared in silence, passed like a secret under blankets that smell like wet wool and weeks of sweat. The buddy system, if you can call it that, emerges not as strategy but as survival. And like so many things on this crusade, it comes with its own blend of comfort and discomfort, camaraderie and tension, snoring and stolen elbows to the ribs. At first, you're hesitant. Everyone is. Sleeping shoulder to shoulder with strangers feels unnatural, too close, too vulnerable. You try to keep your distance that first week, curling up with your pack in your shame like they might insulate you, but that fails fast. By the third frigid night, you're pressed against a moustached man from Burgundy who insists on telling you about his goats before he passes out mid-sentence. There's an unspoken etiquette that develops in these human piles. You don't comment on body odour. You don't complain about noise unless it's life-threatening. You don't talk much at all, really. You just lie there, limbs tangled, wrapped in cloaks and dirty blankets, breathing each other's exhale, hoping the night passes without incident. Soon enough, you get picky. You notice who runs hot and who's basically a walking icicle. You seek out the furnace-like bodies, Thick men with layers of fat, or those who always seem to sweat no matter the temperature. You inch closer each night, subtly aligning yourself with the warmest group. There's one old soldier, toothless and grumpy, but radiating heat like a forge. He smells like onions and to regret, but he's become the unofficial MVP of your cold weather sleeping rotation. Then there are the sleepers you try to avoid, the ones who twitch, kick, or mutter unsettling things in their sleep. One man screams names each night, waking with a jolt and reaching for his sword. No one wants to lie next to him. You don't blame them. There's a fine line between freezing and getting stabbed by a sleepwalker. Still, most of the time, the huddle works. Not perfectly, there's always one exposed heel or a drafty gap in the blanket rotation. But it's enough to keep your teeth from chattering all night. And on the rare nights when you have something warm in your stomach, it almost feels bearable. Almost. Historical fact break. Medieval armies, including crusaders, routinely relied on communal sleeping to preserve warmth during cold campaigns. While tents offered some protection, the majority of men slept in groups, sharing body heat as the primary defence against the cold. This practice was particularly common among the poor and lower-ranking soldiers who lacked personal shelter or thick bedding. Now, here's something stranger. There are records of men sleeping so close together during winter marches that they froze together, as in limbs fused by ice and sweat-soaked cloaks stiff with frost. They'd wake up needing help to separate, their blankets frozen to the ground beneath them. It's grim, it's absurd, it's medieval camping basically, and yet, in all of this human closeness, there's a strange tenderness that emerges. Eventually. You begin to know your neighbour's breathing patterns. You can tell when someone's asleep, when they're having a nightmare, when they're about to cough. You wake up if someone shifts too much, or if their side goes cold, and you instinctively pull the blanket tighter to seal the warmth back in. Words are rarely exchanged, but the ritual becomes familiar. It's not just about heat. It's about safety too. Bandits, wolves, and worse. Sleeping alone means you're a target, but when you sleep in a pile, 5, 10, sometimes even 20 to a cluster, you become part of something bigger. A human furnace with eyes on every side. One night, a young boy in your group, a page, barely 13, gets left out of the sleeping cluster. No one notices until morning when someone trips over his frozen body. He hadn't even cried out, just slipped away in the night, curled into a ball with his arms tucked under his tunic. After that, the older men start pulling anyone nearby into their clusters, whether they know them or not. No one's allowed to sleep alone anymore. It's one of those quiet rules that starts to feel sacred. Of course, there are other complications. You've got women travelling, too, wives, sisters, even some nuns who join the march. Where do they sleep? With their families usually, or with other women in small, carefully guarded groups on the edge of camp. But lines blur when it gets cold enough, people make deals, some out of desperation, some out of loneliness. The church may frown on such arrangements, but the frost doesn't care who lies next to whom. Scholars have debated just how much of this closeness fostered unity among crusaders. Did it build camaraderie and trust, or just breed resentment and cabin fever? The chroniclers are divided. Some wrote of deep friendships forged in the mud and ice, of brothers in arms warming each other through blizzards. Others speak of tension, of fights breaking out over blankets, of men sneaking off in the night to avoid sleeping near someone who smelled like boiled cabbage and sin. You believe both sides. You've seen both sides. There's a night when it's so cold your blanket actually cracks when you unfold it. The fire refuses to light. The wood's wet. Everything. You find yourself lying between two men who don't speak your language, but you all share the same plan. Survive until sunrise. No talking, no bonding, just 3 people lying in the dark like bricks in a wall, bracing against the wind, sharing every degree of body heat they can muster. And when morning comes, the frost clinging to your cloak like cobwebs, you open your eyes and realise all 3 of you are still alive, still breathing, still human, barely. You don't thank each other, you just nod, stand up and start packing. That's how it works out here. Fires are everything now. Not just warmth, not just light, everything. When the sun dips behind the hills and the air tightens with the kind of cold that stiffens your lips and numbs your knees, it's the glow of fire that calls you forward like a beacon. No fire, no sleep. It's that simple. You may as well curl up and wait to die if you don't have a fire nearby. And so night after night it becomes a race. Who can gather the most wood before the sun drops out of the sky like a stone? Firewood is currency out here. Twigs, sticks, bark, branches, even damp ones. You start to see the land differently. Every gnarled bush is potential warmth. Every tree is a sleeping mat if you've got the tools and energy to break it down. There are arguments now, sometimes violent ones, over piles of firewood. Fists fly, threats are made. Once, a man tries to sneak into another group's fire circle and is chased off with a hot poker. You become good at spotting what will burn. Pine needles, fast but flashy. Birch bark, miraculous stuff even when wet. Dry roots, gold. And if you're desperate, animal dung. The smell is horrific, yes, but it smoulders for hours. And sometimes survival smells like something you'd rather not describe. But fire alone isn't enough. You have to maintain it. That's the hard part. The wind is a thief, always looking to snuff out your tiny flame the moment you let your guard down. One careless gust and it's gone. One night your fire dies while you're dozing and you wake so cold your hands won't close. You can't even untie the leather strap on your cloak. You have to lean on another man's hands just to get it off your chest. And then there's the smoke. It burns your eyes, it chokes your throat, it makes everything smell like scorched earth. But you learn to love it in a way. Smoke means heat. Smoke means fire. Smoke means maybe, just maybe, you'll sleep more than an hour tonight. The oldest men in camp know all the tricks. One shows you how to dig a small trench around your fire to keep the coals protected from the wind. Another teaches you how to build a reflector wall using your own shield to bounce heat back into your sleeping spot. And then there's the ash trick, the strangest one. You watch a grizzled, beardless man, probably from Saxony, scoop glowing coals from the edge of a fire, scatter them in a shallow pit, then bury them under a thin layer of dirt and sleep directly over it. You think he's mad at first, but then you try it. You gather a few small embers, scatter them carefully and tamp a layer of soil on top. You lay your cloak down, lower yourself onto the warm mound and wait. It works. It actually works. Not scalding, just gently warm. A soft, radiating heat that seeps up through your bones. You fall asleep faster than you have in days. This was real. Crusaders used fire pits or earth beds to trap heat, a clever and sometimes dangerous method of staying warm in freezing conditions. It wasn't common. Most didn't know how or didn't want to risk burning their only blanket. But for the few who mastered it, it made the difference between frostbite and function. But here's a quirky one for you. Some men believed sleeping near fire attracted demons. Yes, demons, particularly on moonless nights. They'd whisper about sulphur and flame drawing evil spirits. And some even kept a small piece of iron or a blessed charm near their bedding to trap bad spirits in the coals. One man in your camp insists on sleeping with a horseshoe next to his head, as if it's the only thing between him and eternal damnation. And if you think that's odd, try this. One evening a fire gets too big. A man builds it high and wide trying to dry his wet cloak. He nods off. No one notices until his canvas lean-to is ablaze, and in the panic, half the camp wakes up swinging swords in their nightclothes. He survives, barely, but the entire hillside smells like scorched wool for 2 days, and no one trusts him near fire ever again. You sleep further from him after that. Scholarly debate? Oh, there's plenty here. Some medieval sources claim fire was rare in larger camps, mostly limited to cooking stations or guarded noble tents. But recent archaeology suggests that small personal fires were common, especially in winter months, and that scorched earth patterns from old Crusader campsites support this. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. Not everyone could afford the luxury of fire every night, but for those who could, whether through knowledge, muscle, or luck, it was a critical piece of the survival puzzle. You start to treat your fire like a living thing. You feed it carefully, nurse it through the night. You learn to bank coals under ash to reignite them in the morning. You stare into the embers like they're old friends, telling stories without speaking. You and your fire understand each other now, both tired, both fragile, both clinging to life in a world that seems designed to snuff you out. And yet, even with fire, you're never truly warm. There's always one part of you exposed, the heel, the shoulder, the cheek pressed against the cold dirt. But it's better than nothing, better than the wind that tries to scrape your skin away each night. One night, just as you're falling asleep with your back to the fire, someone nearby sings softly. A lullaby, maybe. A tune you don't know. It blends with the crackling of the wood and the hush of the night, and for a moment the cold seems very far away. You close your eyes and the fire dances behind your lids, and somehow sleep comes easy. At this point, you're not even pretending that cleanliness is a priority. You smell like smoke, dried sweat, and something faintly resembling old milk. And yet, wool. Always wool. You used to think it was just something your grandmother spun, or what sheep were for besides stew. Now it's a second skin. A slightly itchy, mildly claustrophobic, suspiciously stained second skin that keeps you alive when the wind howls and the stars shine too sharp. Wool is a miracle material, everyone says, and you believe it now with religious fervour. It's the only fabric in your life that still works after being soaked in rain, dried over an open flame, slept in for 5 nights straight, and chewed on by a mule. Cotton, forget it. Linen, fine for summer underwear and saints' burial shrouds, but not for sleeping on frozen ground. Wool is what separates the living from the dead on cold nights. You've learned to layer creatively. You've got your coarse tunic, a thicker over-tunic you bartered for with 3 onions and half a boiled egg, and a ragged cloak that may or may not have belonged to someone who didn't make it past the last river crossing. You don't ask questions anymore about the provenance of your clothing. If it's wool and not infested with fleas the size of thumbnails, you'll wear it. Some men wrap their heads with wool scarves or strips torn from ruined cloaks. You've seen turbans, hoods, even balaclava-like setups made from old sleeves. One guy in your cluster wears 2 cloaks tied together with bits of twine and looks like a sleeping bear every night. You envy him. He snores like an avalanche, but he's warm. And shukni. God, if you could have one luxury, it would be a decent pair of wool socks. Yours are full of holes and make your boots smell like hot vinegar, but they still insulate somehow, even wet. You've started drying them at night by the fire, propping them on sticks like little pathetic flags of survival. It's not glamorous, but it's life. There's a saying someone repeats around the fire one night. A dry wool tunic is worth more than silver. You're starting to understand why. In this world, silver can't keep your blood from freezing in your veins. Silver can't trap heat against your skin when the frost creeps into your marrow. But wool can. Historical fact, medieval wool, especially in Europe, was a critical part of daily life and trade. It wasn't the soft, machine-washed wool we know today, but a heavier, greasier fabric, often still containing natural lanolin. That waxy substance actually helped repel water, and made the wool somewhat insulating even when wet. For Crusaders, it wasn't just a clothing choice, it was armour against the elements. Here's the quirky bit. Some Crusaders believed that sheep raised near holy sites, say near monasteries or places where saints had lived, produced blessed wool with special protective qualities. Pilgrims would buy cloaks or socks made from these sheep, convinced they'd keep illness and chill away. You haven't come across any holy sheepwear yourself, but if someone offered you a sacred sock right now, you'd pay in blood. Of course, there's an unfortunate downside to wearing so much wool all the time. You become a walking habitat. Fleas, lice, even mites burrow into the fibres. You've started itching constantly. You see others doing it too, scratching at their collars, rubbing their backs against trees like bears. Some joke about burning their cloaks after the Crusade. Others plan to keep them forever. Proof, they say, that they were tested and survived. One night, while you're huddled with a few others near the fire, you notice something odd. One man, sleeping closer than usual, isn't wearing wool. He's got a linen tunic, crisp white, completely wrong for this weather. You wonder if he lost a bet or his cloak. Then you realise he's shivering hard, violently. His jaw is clenched. His hands are curled into claws. You nudge the man next to you and both of you shift over, tucking him between your cloaks like you're covering a child. No one says a word. You're not trying to be kind, you're just trying to stop another corpse from appearing in the camp by dawn. It's a strange kind of brotherhood, forged in fire and wool. You might not know the names of the men beside you, but you know the sound of their breathing. You know the way they curl up when they sleep. You know who runs warm, who needs to sleep closer to the fire, who kicks in their sleep. It's like sharing a bed with ghosts. Grimy, farting ghosts who have nothing but cloaks and wool to keep them here. There's debate, believe it or not, about how much wool was actually carried on the early Crusades. Some scholars suggest that people brought as much as they could. Blankets, tunics, hoods, socks. Others argue that due to weight constraints and the difficulty of transport, Most peasants and foot soldiers only had what they wore on their backs, and maybe a spare cloak. Either way, it's clear that wool was the essential armour of the average crusader, not against arrows or swords, but against the long, unrelenting nights. And in those nights you find rituals forming. You shake out your cloak, you fold it just right, you press your body against your bedmates in the same order each night, always with your back to the fire if possible. You tuck the hem of your tunic into your belt to stop drafts. You wedge your boots close to the coals, hoping they don't catch fire. You whisper the same half-remembered prayer, not for glory, not even for survival, but just to wake up without frost on your eyebrows. Wool, as it turns out, becomes more than just fabric. It's a boundary between life and death, a symbol of persistence, a smelly, itchy badge of honour you never take off, not even when it starts to smell like wet moss and sadness. You pull it close around your shoulders, bury your face in its scratchy folds, and fall asleep to the quiet crackle of the fire and the steady breath of the people beside you. The cold is always there, but so is the wool, and for tonight that's enough. You try it once, sleeping in armour, and that's enough to put an end to the idea forever. The stories make it sound noble. Gleaming knights slumped beside their swords, breastplates catching the firelight, helmets resting nobly beside their heads like loyal pets. But in reality, it's a nightmare of clanging, bruises, and total regret. You don't even wear full armour. You're a foot soldier, maybe a minor retainer at best, and your kit's a patchwork, a dented kettle helm, a mail shirt a size too big, and a set of greaves that squeak when you walk. It's heavy, smells like blood and vinegar, and the moment you lie down in it, your spine starts negotiating for a better deal. The chainmail presses into your ribs, the buckles dig into your hips. You can't stretch out properly because the plates jam against each other. It's like trying to nap inside a very angry toolbox. You get maybe 5 minutes of sleep before something cramps, or stabs, or scrapes. And when you try to roll over, you wake up every person within 10 feet with a horrible grinding sound like a sack of silverware tumbling downstairs. Sleeping in armour, you quickly learn, is not a real solution. It's the last resort of a desperate man or a paranoid one. And sometimes, both. There's always that fear in camp, a night raid, a surprise ambush, waking up to screaming steel and fire. So some men do it anyway. They sleep half-suited, breastplate on, helmet off, weapons within reach. It's not about comfort, it's about readiness. But that's the problem. You can't stay ready forever. Eventually your body gives up, and the exhaustion breaks through even the toughest vigilance. You sleep or you collapse, those are the options. And the man who tries to do both, sleep and stay fully armoured, is going to fail at both. Historical fact, very few crusaders actually slept in their armour, despite what paintings or Hollywood might tell you. It was impractical, dangerous, and could lead to severe health issues, rashes, sores, even infections from prolonged contact and lack of ventilation. Mail especially, when worn too long without cleaning, would rub skin raw and open up wounds that could fester. What did they do instead? Most removed the heavier pieces, breastplates, helmets, vambraces, and kept their weapons within arm's reach. Some slept in padded gambesons or partial mail, just enough to move fast if needed, and almost all of them slept in their boots. Because no one wants to waste precious seconds jamming frozen feet into stiff leather when arrows are flying. And here's the quirky angle. Some crusaders believed that sleeping in armour could actually anger their guardian saints. A few monks in the army preached that excessive fear was a sign of weak faith, and that trusting too much in steel rather than in God was inviting spiritual disaster. One sermon included a line that stuck with you. The Lord protects the sleeping who trust him, but not those who cling to mail like babes to the teat. You're not sure about divine protection, but you are sure about one thing: wearing metal to bed is absolute torture. Still, there's that creeping anxiety every night. What if this is the night the enemy comes? What if this is the night someone sneaks into camp, and you don't have time to strap your gear on? You start sleeping with one hand on your belt, sword nestled next to you like a very unfriendly teddy bear. Your helmet sits within reach. You even wedge your buckler under your pack so it can't be kicked away in a rush. You've seen a few camps ransacked already, places where the firewood still smoulders, where bodies lie half buried in ash. It always happens at night. So you do what you can. You don't wear the armour, but you sleep lighter now, tuned to sound. A horse's nervous snort, a shout in the distance, the faint snap of a twig that might be wind or might not. Some men start sleeping in shifts. The camp isn't official military, it's a mess of pilgrims, soldiers, and holy opportunists. But someone eventually takes charge, rotations are created, watchmen posted. You pull your first night watch 2 weeks in, and you hate every second of it. You stand there, freezing in the dark, trying not to nod off as the fire dies low and the shadows play tricks in the trees. But when you lie down afterward, the sleep feels safer. You're less tense. The sword at your side still feels necessary, but the weight on your chest is lighter. The thing about fear is that it's not constant. It pulses, rising and falling like tides. Some nights you feel almost safe. The camp is large, fires glow in every direction, and the presence of others is reassuring. Other nights you're positive this is the end. You lie there counting heartbeats, hearing whispers in the dark, certain that the crunch of leaves nearby is death approaching. There's debate among historians about how often Crusader camps were actually attacked at night. Some argue that it was rare, that both Christian and Muslim forces preferred to fight in the day. Others insist that surprise raids, thefts, and small skirmishes were frequent, especially when the Crusaders passed through hostile territory. Either way, the threat was real enough to keep entire camps restless and half-armoured for months at a time. After your armour experiment, you go back to sleeping in your wool layers, padding your side with a rolled gambeson. You keep the mail close, but not on. You're learning to balance preparedness with survival. You need to rest. A dead man in armour is still dead. One night an argument breaks out near the fire. 2 men accusing each other of stealing a helmet. You sit up, groggy, sore and cold. The firelight flickers off the plates and blades and angry faces. And you realise something. It's not just the cold that's trying to kill you out here. It's the tension, the strain, the edge that everyone's living on night after night. You lie back down, pull your cloak over your ears, and hope they sort it out before it comes to blood. And as you drift towards sleep, you whisper to your sword a little joke. Stay close, but don't hog the blanket. Rain, you quickly learn, is not just an inconvenience. It's a curse, a test, a full-blown siege laid by the sky on your last nerve. When it first begins, you're relieved. The dust finally settles, the stink of the camp briefly washes into the earth, and there's even something kind of pretty about the gentle patter of water on canvas and cloaks. You even tip your face upward like a fool, mouth open, letting a few drops hit your tongue like you're in some romantic fable. But by nightfall, that whimsical mood has drowned along with your bedding. The thing about medieval wool is that yes, it keeps you warm when it's dry, and even when it's damp it clings to your body like a stubborn lover. But once it's soaked, really soaked, saturated from hours of unrelenting drizzle or a full-on downpour, it becomes heavy, miserable, and nearly impossible to dry. You strip it off at the fire, hold it near the flames, and the only thing it gives back is steam and that horrible smell of wet animal. You try to sleep in it anyway, of course. What choice do you have? There's no spare cloak, no inn, no rescue. You find a spot near the fire and try to wring out your gear, which is about as effective as squeezing a sponge made of regret. The rain hasn't just soaked your clothes, it's seeped into your pack, into your boots, or even into your bread, which now tastes like ash and mildew. That night the wind picks up. The rain comes sideways, biting and cold. There's no dry ground left. Every inch is mud, slippery, sucking, alive. Your blanket is wet, your socks are wet, and the only thing that's still dry is the inside of your mouth, which now tastes like copper and disappointment. You lie there, twisted in a cold, damp cocoon of misery, listening to the sound of the fire hissing and spitting as the rain tries to kill it. Historical fact: medieval armies, especially during the Crusades, struggled immensely with wet conditions. Few had proper waterproof gear, and even tents were prone to leaks if not meticulously maintained. A prolonged rainstorm could destroy morale, ruin supplies and lead to hypothermia, even in relatively mild climates. Many of the Crusaders died not from battle, but from exposure. Drenched, chilled, and too weak to recover. And here's a fringe detail that almost makes you laugh when you first hear it. Some chroniclers claim that certain knights tried to waterproof their cloaks using rendered animal fat. Basically, they'd slather themselves in grease like they were preparing to roast, hoping it would repel the water. Maybe it worked a little. Maybe it just made them smell like meat. Either way, it's not a trick. You've been brave, or desperate, enough to try yet. But even grease can't save you now. There's no firewood. It's all wet. You and the others try anyway, huddled around a smouldering mess of branches that coughs up more smoke than heat. Your hands are shaking. Not from fear, just from sheer cold. One man next to you just stops moving. You nudge him. He stirs. Barely. You pull his arm over yours and press him closer. Nobody even looks. You're past shame. Past pride. A scholarly debate you might appreciate in your current condition. There's ongoing discussion among historians about whether the average crusader truly understood how dangerous wet clothing could be. Some argue that men from colder climates, like northern France or the Rhineland, would have known better and carried dry changes. Others suggest that many simply didn't think that far ahead, and that poor planning combined with limited resources doomed thousands when the weather turned. Your vote? Definitely the second one. There's something uniquely cruel about trying to sleep while wet. Your body shivers constantly, like it's trying to shake itself dry, but it doesn't work. Your muscles lock up, your fingers go numb, you tuck them under your armpits and pull your knees to your chest, trying to create some little core of warmth. It fails. Every part of you touches something damp, cloth, ground, someone else's soaked cloak. You start to hallucinate warmth. You remember what it felt like to step near a hearth back home, the glow, the smell of roasting meat. You'd give up your sword, your boots, even the hope of heaven, just to feel that again. Sleep doesn't really happen. It's more like small twitching moments of unconsciousness, interrupted by coughing, shivering, or the sound of someone groaning in pain. One man starts singing, quietly, tunelessly. A lullaby, maybe. No one tells him to stop. It's something to hold on to in the darkness. You wonder if this is how the cold really kills, not in one dramatic moment, but slowly, by shaving off bits of your will to live. You start to think maybe you don't need to reach Jerusalem. Maybe lying down and not getting up wouldn't be so bad. But then someone nearby sneezes like a thunderclap and you jolt, startled into survival again. You manage a few minutes of real sleep toward dawn. When you wake, the rain has stopped, but everything is coated in fog. The fire is nothing but a mound of wet ash. Your blanket weighs twice as much as it did yesterday. Your feet are swollen, your back is sore, and your spirit feels like it's been gently chewed on by wolves. But the sky is lighter now, that pale, indifferent blue that says the sun is trying to come back. Someone's already moving around, dragging wood over to try the fire again. You sit up slowly, joints stiff, and check your pack. Most of your food is ruined. Your bread is a soggy mass. Your jerky is damp and furry. You nibble it anyway. And yet, you're still here, still breathing, still crawling toward a goal you can't even visualize anymore. You wring out your cloak again, slap your boots against a rock to get the worst of the muck off and stand. Your knees protest. Your spine pops. You feel about 80. But you're upright, and for the moment, that's enough. Tonight you think maybe the rain will hold off. Maybe the fire will catch better. Maybe someone will have something dry to trade. Or maybe not. Maybe you'll get wet all over again. But at least now you're ready for it. The hill looks harmless in daylight, rolling, green and speckled, with scrub brush. But by nightfall, it becomes something else entirely. Something mean. Something that wants you to regret every step you've taken since the sun disappeared. You had no choice but to make camp up here. The valley below was too marshy, and the road too narrow for all the wagons. The commanding officer, a knight with more scars than patience, barked the order like it was a gift, a high ground, dry ground. He failed to mention that high ground also means cold ground. The breeze is a sharp knife tonight. At first, you tell yourself it's just wind. But by sundown, it's very clearly something worse. This isn't a breeze, it's a low-level assault. The kind of wind that slides under your cloak like it's looking for your soul. No matter how tightly you wrap yourself in wool, it finds the cracks. It climbs up your sleeves, pries into your hood, sniffs out the gap between your boots and leggings. You might as well be naked for all the good your clothes are doing. And the stars? They're brighter up here, crisp and cold and completely indifferent to your suffering. The sky looks like shattered glass frozen in black ink. You're supposed to take comfort in this. Maybe say something poetic about God's creation. But all you can think about is how far away it all is. The moon doesn't even look friendly tonight. It just watches you, bored, while your toes go numb. You don't even try to sleep alone tonight. That would be suicide. The wind's too strong to build a proper fire. Every time someone tries, the flames sputter and die, smoke whipped away before it can rise. So you huddle instead, close and miserable. With 4 other men behind a crumbling rock wall someone found halfway up the slope. It's not a windbreak so much as a suggestion. But at this point, you'll take suggestions. You curl in tight, so does everyone else. No one talks. Talking wastes breath and lets cold in. You're all just breathing into your cloaks like it's your last warm act before the night finishes you off. The rocks under your hip bones jab like guilty reminders of whatever sins you forgot to confess. Here's your historical nugget. Elevation was often a strategic choice for medieval armies when making camp. High ground meant the better defense, better visibility, and often drier terrain. But it came with a brutal trade-off: exposure. Without tree cover or natural wind barriers, higher camps were colder, windier, and significantly more dangerous when the weather turned. And soldiers didn't always have a say in the matter. If the commanders wanted the hill, the men got the hill, frostbite be damned. And here's the fringe twist. Some medieval physicians believed that night air on hills was more dangerous than in valleys, not because of cold, but because unbalanced vapours rose from the earth. Basically, they thought the higher you went, the more likely you were to inhale bad air. Cures involved herbal poultices, sleeping near burning herbs, or, even better, just staying lower. You'd laugh at that now, but as your lungs ache in the biting wind, you start wondering if maybe those old doctors had a point. Sleep in conditions like this becomes less about rest and more about survival mode. You don't fall asleep, you get shut down. It's like your body powers off in protest, hoping to conserve whatever heat hasn't already escaped. You stop feeling your toes, then your fingers, and after a while your ears start to burn in that uniquely terrifying way that says, "You might lose me forever, friend." Your dreams are strange up here. Short-clipped things. You dream of fire, but it's too far away to reach. You dream of your mother's stew, of dry boots, of hay-filled mattresses, then you jolt awake to the wind trying to rip your cloak off like a thief. Someone mutters something nearby. Another coughs. A third groans, just a long low sound of pure discomfort. By now, you've begun developing a sixth sense for danger. Not the battle kind, the weather kind. You can smell frost before it hits. You can hear the wind shift in pitch. You know instinctively when the night is going to be worse than the one before. And this one feels like a test. You squeeze your legs tighter to your chest. You pull the hood of your cloak over your face and nestle into the shoulder of the man beside you, who doesn't even flinch. In the dark, distinctions fade. Rank, nation, purpose, it all vanishes. There's just warmth, or the lack of it. There's some scholarly back and forth on how well-equipped Crusader armies were for elevation camping. Some argue they carried windbreaks, folding shelters, and thicker cloaks for highland bivouacs. Others believe those were reserved for the higher-ranking elite, while everyone else relied on positioning and prayer. Based on your current situation, you lean heavily toward the positioning and prayer theory. You try repositioning now, moving your back to the stone wall to block the wind. It helps. Barely. A man next to you shifts as well, mumbling curses in a language you don't speak. You're not even sure who he is anymore. You don't care. He's warm. That's enough. You wake sometime later to a horrible sound. Not shouting, not danger, just silence. Too much of it. The wind has stopped. The fire is completely out. Everything is so quiet that the scratch of someone moving feels like a hammer to your eardrum. And you know what that means. Frost. Heavy frost. The kind that sets in like a slow poison creeping over limbs and lungs. You can see your breath as a thick cloud in the air. It doesn't disappear, just hovers. You want to stay curled in place. But instinct says move. You wriggle your fingers, flex your toes, do anything to keep circulation going. You slap your legs quietly. You cough on purpose just to keep your chest moving. One of the others grunts in agreement, or maybe pain. Either way, the message is clear. Don't go still. When the sun finally returns, it's like a mercy you forgot you were owed. It doesn't bring warmth right away, but it brings colour back to the world. Blue sky, distant birdsong, the whisper of wind, no longer violent. You unfold yourself slowly like something dug out of the ground and stretch. It hurts. Everything hurts. But you made it. You didn't freeze. Not this time. Someone near you isn't moving. The others nudge him. Still nothing. You look away, and you pack up your cloak. You expected desserts to be dry. You even expected them to be hot. What you didn't expect, what no one properly warned you about, is just how cold they get at night. It's a trick, really. The sun bakes the world into a shimmering oven all day long. You march across cracked earth and stone paths that radiate heat through your soles. You sweat from places you didn't know had sweat glands. Your cloak turns into a portable oven mitt. You can barely think straight. But then, right around the time the sun slides off the edge of the world like it's done working, everything flips. You've never known anything like it. One moment you're wiping your brow with your sleeve and cursing the endless sun, and the next you're trying to stuff your entire body back into your own cloak like a snail retreating into its shell. The desert turns into a vast black refrigerator. Your skin tightens, your breath fogs, and the sand, yes, the sand feels like ice underneath your blanket. Welcome to the famous desert paradox. Roasting by day, freezing by night. You've heard people say that the desert is lifeless. That's a lie. It's just incredibly efficient at making you feel like you don't belong here. Tonight there's no wind, just the vast silence of open dunes stretching in every direction. It's different from the woods or the hills. The air doesn't move much. It just sits, heavy and dry and cold as iron. The stars above are ridiculously bright. You can see more than you've ever seen in your life, whole galaxies smeared across the sky like spilled salt. It's beautiful, but it's also unnerving. There's no tree cover, no walls, no firewood, just you, your cloak, and the sound of your own shivers echoing in your skull. You sleep in a trench tonight, a shallow scoop of sand you dig with your hands. It doesn't feel like much, but it helps. A little insulation, a little less exposure. You line it with your blanket and cloaks, using your pack as a windbreak. It's clever, you think, until you realise your blanket is full of sand and your water skin is frozen stiff. Historical truth time. During the Crusader campaigns in the Levant, soldiers often faced extreme temperature shifts, especially in the semi-arid and desert regions of what is now Syria, Jordan, and Israel. These weren't tropical paradises. They were harsh, unforgiving environments that baked men during the day and froze them at night. The lack of familiar vegetation, combined with rocky soil and sand, meant no firewood and very little natural shelter. Crusaders were frequently caught off guard. Fringe fact 4 flavour? Some crusaders, after enough nights like this, began adopting local habits. They wrapped their heads and faces with cloth, yes, like turbans, to conserve heat and shield themselves from the cold night air. They even learned to use heated stones, buried deep into the sand during the day, as a kind of primitive space heater at night. The locals knew this trick. The Crusaders learned it the hard way, by either copying or freezing. You try something like it tonight. You find a flat stone, let it sit in the sun all afternoon, then drag it over to your trench at sunset. It's still warm when you place it under your blanket. For the first 20 minutes it's glorious, like lying next to a sun-warmed dog. Then it fades. Fast. But for those precious minutes, you remember what comfort felt like. There's a strange silence here. Not just the kind that makes you feel alone, but the kind that presses in around you. No frogs, no trees creaking, just the occasional grunt from someone nearby, maybe a whispered prayer, and the sound of someone brushing sand off their face for the 100th time. Sleep comes hard, you can't seem to get comfortable. The sand shifts, your blanket itches, every exposed inch of your skin feels like it's being nibbled on by ice beetles. And the cold, unlike in the hills, feels clean, almost sterile. There's no moisture, just this unrelenting dryness that makes your lips crack and your throat burn. And yet, somewhere in that dark expanse, someone's laughing. A soft, wheezy chuckle. You look over. It's one of the older men, a veteran, judging by the scars and the way he hasn't blinked in an hour. Better than the rain, he whispers. You more who snort. He's not wrong. You'd rather be dry and freezing than soaked and miserable. Barely. Scholars argue about whether the Crusaders adapted quickly to the desert climate. Some say they learned fast, adopting local clothing, adjusting sleep cycles, even changing their rations to include dried fruits and flatbread. Others argue they mostly blundered forward, failing to understand the land they were fighting through, suffering high casualties from exposure and dehydration rather than enemy blades. Based on how your water skin shattered like glass this morning, you're inclined to believe both. Tonight, you try something different. You curl around your boots. Yes, your boots. You take them off, carefully, because getting them back on tomorrow is going to be a nightmare, and press them against your stomach, then wrap your blanket over them. They're warm from the day's march. They cool fast, but for a while, they act like a heat source. You also learn that spooning in the desert is not a luxury, it's standard operating procedure. Everyone piles close. Not because they like each other, but because it's the only way to not wake up feeling like a frozen fish. You don't even know the names of half the men you sleep next to now. One of them has a foot that always ends up on your thigh. Another keeps muttering in his sleep about spiders in the sand, so you ignore it. Better the spiders in his dreams than the scorpions you did see crawling near the bread sack earlier. Your cloak's pulled tight around your face. The stars are still watching. You try to count them just to stay sane, but you lose track after 50. Your breath fogs the inside of the hood. It's not warm exactly, but it's a tiny pocket of less cold air. You fall asleep to the sound of sand shifting, a whisper of movement like paper tearing, and a single whispered word from someone in the dark. Soon. You don't know what they mean. Maybe the next city, maybe the next battle, maybe just morning. Whatever it is, you hope it brings heat. You didn't think it was possible to sleep this well on the ground. Not after all the nights of freezing toes, rain-soaked wool, and waking up with your face half buried in mud. But tonight is different. You're not warm, not really, not in the way you remember from back home, but you're exhausted. And exhaustion, you're discovering, is its own kind of bed. It's the day after a skirmish, nothing epic, nothing worth a song, a ragged clash with a band of local fighters who caught the column during a river crossing. It wasn't a proper battle, more of a panicked mess of mud, shouting and blind swinging. You stabbed someone. You're not sure if they died. You were hit with something, maybe a club, and your shoulder still feels like it's been replaced with a sack of rocks. The adrenaline wore off hours ago, and now your body feels like a church bell someone's been ringing since morning. No one talks much around the campfire tonight. The usual bickering over rations, the passive-aggressive cloak-tugging, gone. Everyone's in that post-fight state of mute survival. The quiet after chaos, the heaviness that settles over everything, thicker than the smoke rising from the cooking fire. You don't even bother setting up a proper sleeping area. You find a patch of flat ground, drop your cloak, and flop down like a bag of flour. There's no adjustment, no rolling around to get comfortable. Your bones make that decision for you. Your body shuts off like a snuffed candle. And somehow this is the best sleep you've had in weeks. Historical fact time. Chroniclers of the Crusades often describe how soldiers slept deeply after combat, no matter the conditions. The mixture of exhaustion, adrenaline crash, and emotional burnout meant that even wounded men would sometimes sleep through storms, fires, or enemy movements. The body simply overrode every discomfort with the demand to rest. Pain, temperature, and fear be damned. And here's a particularly strange detail. It wasn't uncommon for men to sleep beside corpses after battle, simply because they had no choice. When the sun went down, the cleanup stopped. Camp was made wherever there was space, next to the dead, next to discarded weapons, next to the echo of screams. You haven't reached that point yet, but you're close. A few feet to your right, something's lying under a blood-spattered blanket. No one's checked if he's breathing. No one wants to know just yet. There's a peculiar kind of comfort in your body's shutdown. The cold doesn't bite as hard tonight. Your shoulder throbs, but it's distant, like it belongs to someone else. Your fingers twitch in your sleep, little echoes of the fight still playing out somewhere in the back of your mind. But your chest rises and falls, steady and slow. You're alive. That's all that matters right now. You dream, not in full scenes, but in flashes, a red river, your father's barn, the soft clop of hooves on cobblestone, a woman's voice, maybe your mother's, maybe someone else's, calling your name through a wall of smoke. You try to answer, but your mouth is full of ash. Then the firelight fades and the darkness wraps back around you like a familiar cloak. There's a strange intimacy in these kinds of nights. You're lying close to the other survivors. You can hear someone softly crying. Another mutters a prayer, Latin, badly mumbled, maybe improvised. There's no judgment, not tonight. Everyone's voice is reduced to the same shivering whisper. You roll onto your side at some point, not fully awake, but not fully asleep either. Your cheek presses against the dirt. It's cold, but not the bone-deep cold of last week, just the normal kind. You breathe in and smell blood, old and metallic, mixed with smoke and horse sweat, and whatever's rotting in the pile of gear behind you. Scholarly debates about the Crusades often focus on strategy, politics, and religion, but some recent research has shifted attention to the everyday grind of survival. Letters from the period, written by commanders and clerics alike, sometimes include offhand mentions of how deeply their men slept after even the smallest engagement. The body was seen as a kind of vessel, expendable, temporary, always under strain. Rest wasn't restorative, really. It was recovery enough to keep marching. That's all you're doing now. Recovering just enough to keep going. When you wake, your shoulder hurts worse. The joint is stiff, swollen. You try to lift your arm and it's like moving a wet log. You don't even groan, you just stare at it, acknowledge the damage, and start getting dressed anyway. There's no time to deal with it properly. No healers, no bandages, just wool, leather, and the hope that movement will work the pain out. You chew on something vaguely edible, hardtack soaked in broth, or maybe wine, you're not sure anymore, and start packing. The man under the bloodied blanket hasn't moved. Someone nudges him. Nothing. A quiet moment. Then the blanket's pulled over his face. That's it. One more name lost. And still, despite everything, the cold, the blood, the pain, you slept. Not well, not deeply, but you slept. You lived. There's a moment just before you sling your pack over your bad shoulder when you look out over the horizon. The road ahead snakes between hills and crumbles into the distance. It looks long. It is long. But there's no stopping now. You sigh. It hurts. You start walking anyway. Tonight you eat soup, real, actual soup. Not the boiled leather you've chewed in desperation. Not the gritty half stew made from river water and roots. Soup. Hot. Thin, maybe more water than anything else, but still. You can smell the herbs, the fat, the faint ghost of garlic. And in this moment, it's not just a meal. It's a revelation. A miracle. A brief return to humanity in a life that's mostly dirt and ash. Someone traded with a local vendor near the outskirts of a tiny village. You didn't see the exchange, but the rumour spread through camp like wildfire. Hot soup, 5 copper, maybe less if you've got bread. You sold your only clean cloth for a bowl and you don't regret it. The cloth wouldn't have kept you warm tonight. The soup might. You sip it slowly, careful not to spill even a drop. It scalds your tongue, but you welcome the burn. It radiates downward, filling your stomach with a heat that seems to reach places your blanket never does. Your fingers wrap around the bowl like it's a lover's hand. It's just wood. It leaks slightly at the seam, but you hold it like it's precious. The others eat in silence. There's no talking during soup. You can see it in their eyes, that same flicker of comfort, that distant memory of home. One man swears softly with every spoonful like he's praying. Another wipes his mouth after each sip, then looks at the rag like it owes him money. The youngest one, barely 16, tears up. Doesn't hide it either. Just lets the tears run while he chews something soft for the first time in days. Historical note, soup and broth were central to medieval diets, especially during long campaigns. Crusaders relied heavily on portable ingredients, dried legumes, salted meats, wild herbs, anything that could survive a journey without spoiling. When boiled in water over a communal fire, even the most meagre ingredients could produce something warm and filling, and in cold camps that warmth was everything. The interesting part? Many believed soup had medicinal properties beyond just nutrition. A warm broth was seen as a cure for melancholy, for chills, for faintness of spirit, and you believe it. After all, your headache's faded, your fingers ache a little less, your stomach isn't twisting itself into angry knots anymore. Fringe fact of the evening. There's a chronicled account of a group of crusaders who believed that drinking soup made from a pot that had never been washed brought strength and luck. The logic? The old flavour left behind in the pot would enhance the next batch, so they never washed it. For months, just added new ingredients to the old thick sludge lining the bottom. You think about that as you scrape the sides of your own bowl. It might not be clean, but it tastes like heaven. You finish slowly, making the last spoonful stretch. The heat lingers inside you like a secret. When you finally put the bowl down, it feels like something sacred has ended. You even consider sleeping with it tucked in your blanket. You don't, of course, but you think about it. Tonight's fire is stronger than usual. There's more wood, maybe from the abandoned carts on the road. Someone even built a proper pit with stones stacked to reflect the heat. The camp glows a little brighter. People sit closer. There's laughter, soft and uncertain, like they're afraid it might summon the gods of suffering back from wherever they've gone. You settle in with a full belly for the first time in days, and the difference is immediate. Your body doesn't tremble with hunger. Your teeth don't chatter. Your heart isn't pounding itself awake every time your head droops. You lie down and sigh, a real deep sigh, and feel something close to gratitude. And sleep comes fast. You dream of kitchens, of big cast-iron pots bubbling over flames, of bread warm from the oven, your mother's voice humming while she stirs. You haven't thought of her in weeks, maybe longer, but now she's here, feeding you, spoonful after spoonful, her hand warm on your neck. You wake only once in the middle of the night to the sound of someone throwing up a few feet away. Maybe the soup didn't sit well with them, or maybe they hadn't eaten in too long. You roll over, shift your blanket, and pull your cloak tighter around your neck. The nausea isn't yours. Not tonight. You close your eyes again and sink back into that dream of warmth. Here's something the historians argue about. Just how nourishing were Crusader meals, really? Some believe they ate better than we think, using local resources and knowledge to cook hearty regional dishes. Others suggest starvation was always a few missed supply wagons away. Diseases related to malnutrition, scurvy, dysentery, plain old wasting, were common, especially in long sieges or inland marches. Either way, one good meal could change everything. Soup wasn't just food, it was hope in a bowl, and you feel it now. Hope, thin, faint, but real. By morning, your limbs don't ache as much, your mood is less brittle. You're not smiling, not yet, but your thoughts are less sharp, less cruel. You even help a limping man repack his gear. He grunts in thanks, and you nod. No words, just shared understanding. You'll be hungry again by midday. The road ahead is still cruel. There will be more cold, more nights of damp wool and frostbitten fingers. But for now, you've had soup, you've had warmth, you've had sleep that didn't feel like punishment. And sometimes that's enough to keep going. You never thought you'd find comfort in the company of a goat, but here you are, curled up behind one, your arm draped loosely over its side like it's an old friend or a hairy, flatulent pillow. The goat doesn't seem to mind. In fact, it's warm, very warm. And after 3 days of bad weather and even worse sleep, warmth matters more than pride. You're not alone in this new strategy either. The whole camp looks like a strange barnyard tonight, with soldiers and animals bedded down together, like some holy family in a manger. It started out as an accident. A donkey wandered into someone's bedroll 2 nights ago during a windstorm, plopped down on the nearest body and refused to move. The man underneath swore for a minute, then realised that the donkey was radiating glorious natural heat. The next morning he declared it the best sleep of his life, bruised ribs notwithstanding. Since then, people have started sleeping with the animals, not just near them. Horses are too skittish, unless you're one of the nobles who brought trained war horses that barely blink at fire. But goats, sheep, mules, perfect. They're tired too. They don't care. As long as they're not cold or harassed, they'll sit beside you and let you leech every degree of their warmth without complaint. You've heard stories about people back home keeping chickens in their homes for heat during winter. This is just that, scaled up and slightly more chaotic. Tonight, you share your space with a goat named Isabeau. You didn't name her. The original owner is 3 weeks dead, and no one else wanted to change it. She's compact, fuzzy, and makes a grunting noise every time you move too fast. You've given her a scrap of your old bread. She's rewarded you by not biting your fingers when you pet her. You consider this a fair trade, and yes, you smell terrible. The goat doesn't help, obviously. She smells like straw and sour milk and a hint of wet socks, but she's dry and warm, and in this world, those are the most valuable qualities anything can offer you. You'll take stench over frostbite. Historical fact, livestock were often brought along on crusades, especially by peasants and common foot soldiers, chickens for eggs, goats for milk, and sometimes sheep for wool or meat. These animals didn't just feed the army, they travelled with it, lived with it, and sometimes became indispensable parts of the mobile camp structure. And yes, in colder conditions, people absolutely did sleep beside them for warmth. The fringe detail. There are a few scattered records, almost certainly exaggerated, of soldiers forming emotional attachments to their animals on campaign. One tale speaks of a knight who refused to enter battle without his goat tied to a tree nearby. Another claims a group of crusaders erected a tiny stone cross for a mule that died during a snowstorm, saying it had served more faithfully than any man. Whether true or not, these stories underline something real. In a world of chaos and death, even an animal can become a tether to something sane. You pull your blanket over your shoulder and adjust Isabeau's position just slightly, trying not to disturb her rumbling breaths. The heat between you is trapped in the folds of your cloak, and for once, your feet don't feel like blocks of ice. You breathe deep. It smells like livestock, smoke, and unwashed bodies. You no longer flinch at these things. They're just part of life now. Someone nearby tries to coax a sheep to lie down next to them. It bleats, annoyed, then plops onto its own side with zero interest in being anyone's bed warmer. Someone else swears as their mule steps on their hand. There's a short burst of laughter, genuine laughter. A sound you haven't heard in days, maybe weeks. You shift again, feeling something press against your hip. A hoof? No, just a sharp rock. You dig it out with numb fingers and toss it aside, then lay your head back down on your makeshift pillow. your rolled-up tunic wrapped in the softer part of your cloak. You close your eyes. Tonight, there's no frost in the air. No rain, just the occasional bray or snort or rustle of hay. The fire is steady, flickering low and orange. You're surrounded by the sounds of animals breathing, people muttering softly, and boots being kicked off. It's not peaceful exactly, but it's calm. Strange how the presence of a goat can do that. There's a warmth to the world tonight that doesn't come from firewood or wool. It comes from living things, moving, breathing, imperfect and generous in their own silent way. You haven't felt connected to anything for a while now. Not the cause, not the mission, not even the people around you, but Isabeau, grumpy, farting, bread-stealing Isabeau, has curled up against your side like she trusts you. And that means something. There's ongoing scholarly discussion about the emotional state of the average crusader. Some historians argue that constant exposure to violence and hardship hardened these men beyond empathy, while others believe that small private moments, like sharing warmth with an animal, served as anchors to sanity and humanity. Based on tonight, you're inclined to believe the latter. You fall asleep to the rhythmic sound of the goat breathing. She shifts now and then, but never strays. You dream again, not of war or hunger, but of a quiet barn, of soft hay, of candlelight flickering on wooden beams, someone's humming in the background. It might be your mother, or maybe someone else from the village. It doesn't matter. It's a good dream. And in the morning, when the world pulls you back into its cold grip, you find that Isabeau's still there, pressed against your side, her eyes half-lidded and content. For now, at least, you both made it through another night. You don't cry when you open the bundle. That would be dramatic. But your breath catches, just for a second, when you unfold the cloth and see the familiar stitches, your sister's crooked little cross on the corner, the red thread she always used when she didn't have enough of the right colour. The wool is thicker than anything you've carried with you since the journey began. Soft, real, clean. It smells faintly of home, of smoke from your hearth, of lavender if you close your eyes and really breathe it in. It's a blanket, a real one. Not a soldier's rag or a coarse cloak patched with leather, but a hand-woven blanket from your own village, probably from your family's chest. It must have cost them dearly to send it this far. The man who delivered it, some merchant with a half-toothless smile and a cart full of letters and parcels, said he was paid in coin and fresh eggs to carry it eastward. He'd found your unit by pure luck, he claimed, though you suspect he'd followed the smell of desperation like every other war-adjacent profiteer. Still, you don't question it. You just take it, with both hands. There's something almost holy about the way you lay it out that night. You don't throw it on the ground like you would a bedroll. You place it carefully, smoothing it down over your usual sleeping mound, just a rise of earth, a hollow scraped out by your own body over weeks of repetition. Then you sit beside it and just look at it for a while. It's absurd, really. You've slept on the ground, under trees, beneath wagons. You've used rocks for pillows, tucked your face into goat fur for warmth, and shared a blanket with men who reeked of pus and roadkill. But somehow this one soft blanket from home feels like the first good thing in a very long time. Historical fact, during the Crusades it wasn't uncommon for families to send parcels to their loved ones when possible, especially if the crusader was high-ranking or travelled with a group that kept to known routes. Letters, wool garments, preserved food, even charms or tokens from home were prized beyond measure. For many, these items were reminders that the world they left behind still existed. And here's a fringe detail. Some blankets were sewn with prayers, literal lines of script stitched in Latin, or Old French, asking for divine protection. It wasn't about superstition, it was about presence. A mother or wife's way of tucking herself into the folds of a journey she couldn't make. There's no writing on yours, but the cross-stitch is enough. It's her signature, and that's better than any scroll. You wrap yourself in it as the fire dies down. It's warmer than it has any right to be. The first real warmth you've felt since that soup 2 nights ago. You fold the edges over your shoulders, tuck your knees in close, and burrow into it like you're 8 years old again, hiding from winter storms in your family's loft. The ache in your ribs fades a little. The stiffness in your neck softens. You let out a sound. Not quite a sigh. Not quite a laugh. No one says anything. They just look, a few of them. One nods. Another offers a small smile. They get it. A new blanket, it is like gold out here. A blanket from home? That's treasure. You sleep better than you have in weeks. The cold doesn't claw at you. The wind rattles your tent flap, a piece of old canvas nailed between two poles, but you don't feel it. You dream of the hearth, of thick stew in clay bowls, of your mother's hands brushing dust from your shoulders after a long day in the fields. You dream of the dog who used to lie at your feet, of your father's old jokes, the scent of morning bread. And when you wake up, your face is damp, not from dew, your eyes have betrayed you. Just a little. You wipe it away fast. No one needs to see that. But the warmth lingers. There's a scholarly debate that makes its rounds in medieval history circles. How much of the Crusader experience was shaped by physical discomfort versus emotional isolation? Some argue that the true agony of the campaign wasn't the hunger or cold, but the absence of home, of the rituals and relationships that made men feel like more than bodies in armour. Things like a blanket, a letter, a familiar scent. These were anchors. To lose them was to lose yourself. You believe that now, because when you look at this blanket, you feel like yourself again. Not just a crusader, not just a man trudging toward a city he's never seen for a cause he barely understands, but someone who had a life, a history, a home. That blanket is proof you mattered before this march ever began. You carry it with you the next day, see? Rolled and tied across your pack like a banner. It draws looks. You see envy in a few faces, but no one tries to take it. They wouldn't dare. There's an unspoken law about such things. Everyone has something. A charm, a scrap, a bit of cloth. Yours just happens to be the best. And that night, you lie down first. You stretch out the blanket again. You smooth it down and pull it up to your chin. You curl onto your side and let your body settle into that familiar position, as if the ground were the bed you left behind. Then you close your eyes, and you let sleep come. The man's foot doesn't look like a foot anymore. It's swollen, dark and glossy, shiny in the firelight like something carved out of black wax. You don't want to look, but you can't stop yourself. It's horrible, and somehow worse because you've seen it coming. For days now, he's been limping, dragging that foot like it belonged to someone else. He winced every time he stepped, cursed under his breath when the cold touched his toes. Everyone noticed, but no one said anything. What could you have done? Wrapped it in your last clean cloth? Shared your already wet socks? Now he's lying down on a blanket, propped up on his elbow, staring at the bloated limb like it's a prophecy. One of the priests has been called over. Not for healing, there's no medicine here worth the name. Just to mutter a prayer and maybe convince the man that losing a foot isn't the same as losing hope. But you can see it in his face, he knows, you all know. It's frostbite. Real frostbite. Not the tingling, not the numbness, but the irreversible blackening that means the flesh is dying or already dead. The skin has pulled tight over the bones. His toes don't move anymore, even when someone touches them. You watch as another man, young, panicked, trying to help, presses a hot stone wrapped in cloth against the foot. The man screams, too late. And that's the terrifying thing. You've all had cold feet. You've all woken up with aching hands and numb fingers. You thought that was the worst of it. But this is what happens when you ignore the numbness too long. This is what happens when you're too exhausted to keep checking your own limbs for damage. You shuffle closer to the fire that night. Everyone does. No one talks about it, but there's this magnetic pull now, as if proximity to heat might undo what you've seen. Men who usually sleep half a dozen feet apart are now practically piled together, wrapped in cloaks and muttering quietly, checking their toes like nervous gamblers counting dice. Historical fact, frostbite was a known threat even in the medieval period, though they lack the term for it. They simply referred to limbs as being blackened, or taken by the cold. There were treatments in theory, rubbing with snow, soaking in wine or vinegar, praying over the affected parts, but none of them worked. Once the tissue died, the only options were amputation or slow rot. Fringe fact for the curious, one chronicler described a group of crusaders who began testing their feet each morning by pricking their toes with pins to see if they still felt pain. If not, it was bad news. You hear about this tonight and try it yourself. You jab a tiny stick into your heel and wince. Relief floods your chest. Still good? Still alive. The injured man won't march tomorrow. That's obvious, he won't march again. There's talk of leaving him at the next settlement, or trying to find a monastery where he can be looked after. But there's no monastery nearby. No settlement either. Just another stretch of road and a cold that doesn't care who you are or how much pain you're in. You watch as two others, gruff, silent types, carry him to a spot near the fire and wrap him tighter in cloaks. One even gives up his own blanket. No one complains. That's how it is out here. You help when you can, because you know the day may come when it's your foot or your hand or your mind that fails. There's a scholarly debate about how often frostbite and cold-related amputations actually occurred during the Crusades. Some argue it was rare and confined to extreme climates. Others suggest it was common in winter campaigns and long marches across exposed terrain. The problem is, medieval records rarely linger on the details. A man might be listed as crippled by the cold and nothing more. You imagine there were more like the man beside you, more blackened feet, more screaming, more whispered prayers. The fire burns high tonight. There's more wood. Someone managed to pull apart a ruined wagon for kindling. The smoke smells like pitch and old nails, but no one complains. Heat is heat. You sit close enough to feel the sting on your cheeks, like a sunburn in reverse. You rotate your boots slowly, holding them toward the flames, feeling the leather soften. You talk less tonight, everyone does. The fire crackles, someone sings a low hymn, just one verse, barely audible. It feels less like worship and more like a lullaby for grown men who can't afford to admit they're scared. You're scared too, you don't say it, but your heart hasn't stopped racing since you saw that foot. Eventually the injured man falls asleep, or passes out. His breathing is shallow, his face is pale, sweaty. You hope it's just fever. You hope he makes it to morning. You lie down with your boots tucked inside your cloak, your hands pressed between your knees, and your chin buried in the wool folds of your blanket. You keep one foot out, close to the fire, just enough to feel the heat. You keep checking your toes. You wiggle them every few minutes. You whisper, move as if your body needs a reminder. You don't dream tonight, or if you do, you don't remember it. You wake cold but alive. Your feet still respond, your fingers still bend. The man with the blackened foot is breathing, but barely. You eat a crust of bread and stare into the embers. You move your toes again, just to be sure. Tonight you're not just trying to sleep, you're trying to stay awake. Lucky you pulled watch duty, and luckier still it's the night shift, which means standing in the dark alone, while everyone else curls up near the fire and drifts off into whatever passes for dreams out here. You, on the other hand, are walking slow circles around the outer edge of camp, boots crunching over dry leaves, hand resting on the hilt of your sword, trying not to think about how badly your eyelids want to weld shut. The cold is worse when you're standing still. It sinks into your bones with no friction to chase it away. Marching warms you up. Fighting really warms you up. But standing is a slow death. The wind slides under your cloak like it's trying to taste your skin. You tug the wool tighter and hunch your shoulders, but it doesn't help. Nothing helps, really, except movement. So you pace, a lazy perimeter. The fire flickers behind you, and you can see the silhouettes of sleeping forms bundled like cocoons, heads buried under cloaks, the occasional cough or snore rising out of the stillness. It's peaceful in a way, but also eerie. Out here, silence doesn't feel safe. It feels like something holding its breath. You strain your ears. That's part of the job. Listen. Watch. Keep an eye out for movement in the dark. It's unlikely anything will happen, but that doesn't matter. You have to pretend it might. Raiders, thieves, even wild dogs. Last month someone was bitten in their sleep. No one ever found out what did it, but the rumours spread fast like they always do. Now, no one questions the need for night watch. They just grumble when it's their turn. You glance toward the fire again. It's warm over there, tempting. There's an empty spot beside the goat, a nice furry lump of heat that you could just lean into for a second. But you can't. Not unless you want to be the guy who falls asleep on duty and wakes up with half his gear missing. Or worse, doesn't wake up at all. Historical fact. Night watches were a critical part of any military camp during the Crusades. Camps were particularly vulnerable at night. When enemy scouts could creep in, fires could be sabotaged, or animals, both wild and domesticated, could be stolen. Watch rotations were taken seriously, and sleeping through your shift could mean a flogging, or in some cases execution. The cost of failure was too high. You hear a noise, a soft crunch, and freeze. Your hand tightens on your sword. You scan the trees. Your breath comes out in pale clouds. Nothing. Just a rabbit, probably, or your imagination. But your heart's thudding now, louder than your footsteps. It takes a full minute for your body to stop bracing for an attack that doesn't come. You're so tired your knees feel hollow. You didn't get much sleep the night before, and the soup yesterday might have given you a boost, but it's worn off now. You're running on stubbornness alone. You slap your arms, you flex your fingers, you hum a marching tune under your breath just to keep your brain from slipping. Then you do the math. How long until sunrise? 3 hours, maybe 4. You feel like you could collapse right here in the dirt, Lie down under a tree and just let the cold take you. You wonder briefly what it would feel like. Just stop walking, stop thinking, let the chill seep in. But you keep walking, left foot, right foot, crunch, crunch. There's a quirky story that floats around camp about a knight who stayed awake through 3 entire nights of watch duty by stuffing snow down his boots every hour. His feet were so frostbitten he had to ride in a cart for the next month, but he never once nodded off. Madness is better than death, someone says when they retell the story. You're not so sure. You'd like a little madness and warm feet if possible. Scholarship doesn't have much to say about the emotional toll of standing guard in medieval warfare, but soldiers' letters, what few survive, hint at it. The solitude, the fear, the weight of responsibility. You're not just protecting others from enemies, you're protecting them from their own fragility. If you fall asleep and someone wanders off in the night, or a spark turns a tent into a pyre, that's on you. You pass a pile of gear that someone's left out. You nudge it with your boot just to make sure it's not someone curled up wrong. It's not. Just bag, half frozen. You consider stealing a corner of blanket for yourself, but push the thought aside. You take another slow lap. The fire's burned lower now, just glowing embers under a thin skin of ash. Someone rolls over and mutters a name in their sleep. You pause, listening, just a dream. You can't feel your fingertips. Your nose is running. Your boots are stiff and the leather creaks every time you pivot. You take a seat for a moment on a stone, tucking your chin into your chest like a bird. Just 5 minutes. That's what you tell yourself. 5 minutes. But 5 turns into 10, and your eyes close. And then you hear something that snaps you back upright. A twig. Snapped. Clear as anything. Not an animal this time. That was weight. That was a person. You're up in a heartbeat, sword out, eyes scanning the trees. You feel your blood rushing, the cold retreating under the sudden pulse of adrenaline. Nothing moves. No shapes. No sound. And yet, you swear it wasn't in your head. You don't sleep for the rest of your shift. When dawn finally stains the horizon pink and grey, you stumble back to the fire, boots stiff, hands numb, body heavy. Someone hands you a cup of hot water, not tea, not broth, just warm. You hold it like a relic and crouch by the flames, and not even caring that your face is blotchy and your eyes are red. You survive the watch, and tonight someone else gets to freeze in your place. You've become a connoisseur of ground, not food, not wine, ground. Dirt, leaves, moss, straw, clay, snow crust, gravel, sand. You've learned to judge it all by how forgiving it is when your body collapses onto it for the night. You don't look for comfort anymore. You look for insulation. Anything that keeps the cold of the earth from climbing into your spine like a snake. You've slept on better floors in abandoned barns, and worse floors in the open fields of Anatolia. Now, every new camp brings the same challenge. What can you layer between yourself and the freezing breath of this brutal planet? Tonight, you're lucky. Someone found a pile of straw near a collapsed barn earlier in the day, and brought it back in a cart, blessing the whole camp with armfuls of scratchy yellow salvation. You take a bundle like it's bread from heaven, and set to work building your bed with all the enthusiasm of a stonemason. First you clear a patch, then you lay it thick, a thick, uneven mattress of golden stalks. You've done this before, and you know the trick. Press it down a bit, but not too much. Let the air stay trapped inside. That's where the warmth comes from. Straw on the bottom, cloak on top. Then you. It rustles when you lie down, stiff at first, poking through the wool into your back. But it's warm. Warmer than bare earth. Warmer than wet leaves or frozen clay. It smells a little like animal waste, but honestly, so do you. At this point, your sense of smell has adapted to consider not completely repulsive as a win. Historical fact. Makeshift bedding using natural materials was a widespread practice among medieval armies, especially during winter campaigns or prolonged sieges. Crusaders often slept on beds of straw, leaves, bracken, or even moss when they could find it. Not for luxury, just to put something, anything, between their bodies and the cold, draining earth. Fringe detail? In some regions, it was common for soldiers to carry small sacks of straw in their gear, almost like sleeping mats. Of course, that straw didn't last long. It got wet, mouldy, infested with insects. Still, the idea of bringing your bed with you, like a medieval camping pad, was ahead of its time. Tonight you don't have a sack, just a pile. But it's enough. You wriggle into it, pulling your blanket over your shoulders and tugging your hood down until it covers your nose. The straw crunches and shifts under you like it's settling in too. Every movement sends little tickling itches up your back, but you don't care. It's insulation. It's something. It's the closest thing to a mattress you've known since you left home. You're joined by two others in your little corner of camp. One spreads his own straw beside yours, the other dumps a whole pile in the middle and just flops down like a sack of rocks. They don't say much, but you exchange nods. Brotherhood in straw. They're younger than you, and one of them still tries to brush his tunic clean before bed, as if appearances still matter out here. You used to do that. Now you roll in dirt like a pig if it means staying warm. Tonight is cold, but not freezing. The wind is light. No frost on the ground yet. The kind of night that would have been considered peaceful, beautiful even, if not for the ache in your knees and the stink of your breath. You lie on your side, arm under your head, one boot resting on your pack just in case. You've learnt not to sleep too deeply, but just enough. The straw creaks softly under you as you shift. It makes a kind of lullaby, a dry, papery whisper that's strangely soothing. The fire is close enough to warm your back, and you feel the day's weariness finally start to bleed out of you like wine from a cracked cask. There's a scholarly debate about whether or not medieval soldiers had any understanding of heat loss through the ground. Some historians argue they did. It was intuitive, practical, even if they didn't know the science behind it. Others say no. The bedding was a luxury and rarely considered essential for the average fighter. But when you talk to the old men in camp, the ones missing fingers or dragging bad legs, they all say the same thing. Never sleep on bare ground. It steals from you. They're right. The ground steals. You think about the worst night, the one where you were too tired to even find a good spot, just collapsed in a muddy hollow and woke up soaked and shivering. You didn't speak for a full day afterward. Your lips were purple, your hands useless. That was when you swore never again, and now here you are, victorious in straw. You're almost asleep when the man beside you sighs and says, "This feels like a..." You grunt in agreement. It's a lie, but it's a comforting one. A bed made of stalks and prayer, good enough to trick your aching body. You doze in and out. The fire pops, someone coughs. The air shifts gently and your blanket flutters against your cheek. You tuck it tighter, wiggle your toes and burrow deeper into the straw. One strand finds its way into your collar. You ignore it. In your dreams, you're back home, in your own bed. But the mattress is stuffed with straw instead of feathers, and the pillow is just your arm. It's still the best sleep you've had in weeks. You wake in the morning with straw in your hair, straw stuck to your face, straw in your boots, but no frostbite. No pain in your back, no numbness in your feet. You sit up, stretch slowly, and smile a little. The earth didn't steal from you last night. You beat it. For once. You see his tent before you see him. Rich red canvas, taut and clean, stretched over polished wooden poles like some travelling cathedral. The crest stitched into the flap, a boar's head in gold thread, is unmistakable even after the wind has dusted it with days of dry grit. You stop walking for a moment, not out of reverence but out of sheer disbelief. It's like spotting a palace in the middle of a mud field. This is what the noblemen sleep in. You already know your place, on the edge of camp, under wool and hope. But tonight, for once, your watchpost is near the centre, and you get a clear look at how the upper crust survives. It's not just tents, it's a setup. Layers of fabric to trap heat, rugs laid down to soften the rocky ground. Real furniture, folding stools, a portable table, a wooden chest with iron clasps that probably hold silver spoons and wine instead of bandages, and mouldy bread like your pack. Someone peels back the tent flap, and for just a moment, you catch a glimpse of what's inside: thick furs, a feather-stuffed bedding roll, and, God above, a brass warming pan. You didn't think they really used those out here. That was supposed to be the stuff of lords and fairy tales. But no, there it is, heated coals placed inside a shallow metal pan, slid under blankets to keep the bed warm until the nobleman climbs inside. You want to hate him, you really do, but instead you just stare, with the dull awe of a man who's forgotten what true comfort feels like. Historical fact. High-ranking knights and noblemen often brought elaborate sleeping arrangements on long campaigns, including tents made of thick linen or canvas, lined with wool or even fur. Their beds were sometimes actual frames that disassembled for travel, with padded mattresses and expensive sheets. Warming pans were used in colder climates, filled with embers and slid under bedding before sleep. These were heavy items, transported by pack animals or servants, luxuries that most of the army could barely imagine, let alone afford. And here's a fringe detail. There are accounts of noblemen who employed personal tent servants, whose sole job was to manage the sleeping area, lighting the fire, heating the pan, fluffing the bedding, even warming boots. One knight reportedly refused to rise before his servant had placed his warm cloak over his shoulders to preserve the humours of the night. You're not sure what humours are anymore, but yours feel unpreserved to say the least. You keep walking, your own bedroll slung over your shoulder like a dead dog. No rugs, no warming pans, no servants. Just you and the same blanket you've been airing out over fires and hoping the lice don't mind. Still, something about seeing that tent lingers in your mind. It's not just envy, it's the contrast. The reminder that even here, on this long road toward what everyone keeps calling salvation, there are two kinds of people, those who suffer in the dirt and those who sleep on fur. When you return to your side of camp, the fire is lower, the wind sharper. You lay your bedroll out over your usual spot, rocks and all, and sit down slowly, letting your knees creak and groan like old wood. You shake your blanket, watch a few black flecks drift off into the dirt, and pull it over your shoulders. You wonder what the nobleman is doing right now. Maybe sipping warm wine from a polished cup, maybe writing a letter by candlelight. Seated on a cushioned stool, maybe lying in bed already, his servant brushing the dust from his boots. Meanwhile, you pick a rock out of your hip and try not to notice the cold creeping into your toes. There's a debate among historians about the impact of class differences in Crusader camps. Some argue that the shared hardship of the journey created unity, dissolving social barriers in the face of common danger. Others point out the obvious. Luxury followed wealth, even into the desert, and the rich brought their comforts with them. While foot soldiers died from exposure, noblemen slept on imported pillows. Based on what you've seen, the latter feels more honest. And yet, you don't hate them, not really. You've seen those noblemen fight. When the battle comes, they bleed like everyone else. You watched one get pulled from his horse and dragged through the dirt, screaming. His gilded sword didn't save him. His tent didn't come running to help. In the end, you think, maybe everyone sleeps badly out here. Some just do it with a thicker mattress. You lie down on your cloak. It's scratchy, stiff from old rain and the campfire smoke. Your bedroll is no more than folded wool and a layer of straw you stole from a mule's cart. You position your feet closer to the fire, just enough to take the edge off. You sigh and close your eyes. And to your surprise, you sleep well. Not because it's comfortable, not because it's warm, but because you're so tired, so ground down and hollowed out, that even a rock under your spine feels familiar now. Like a companion, you know how to sleep with pain. You know how to fold your blanket so it traps what little heat your body still makes. You know to pull your hood over your ears, to tuck your hands inside your shirt, to lie still and let sleep carry you like a slow but merciful tide. You dream of carpets and warming pans. You wake to ash and cold, but at least you wake. The camp sounds different when you're half asleep. The edge of consciousness turns everything into a lullaby, or at least something close. The clink of metal, the whisper of wind through dry grass, the soft crunch of boots shifting in the night. But most of all, there's the breathing. The collective inhale and exhale of dozens, maybe hundreds of bodies, some sleeping, some pretending to. It rises and falls in waves like the sea, like lungs that stretch across the whole camp. Then come the other sounds, the snoring first. It's not delicate, it's thunderous. Snorts, wheezes, growls, every variety of disrupted airflow known to man. One man nearby sounds like a goat gargling gravel. Another lets out long dramatic sighs between each breath like he's trying to cry in Morse code. At first it drove you mad. Now you can't sleep without it. Their noise means you're not alone. Their noise means they're still alive. Then it's the mumblers. Every night someone talks in their sleep. Sometimes it's quiet, just a name or a muttered prayer. Other times it's a full conversation, half in Latin, half in something you don't recognise. One man recites his grocery list every night like clockwork. Onions, leeks, flour, 2 cheeses. You've never figured out if he's serious or just in tennisem. But then there are the songs. Not often, not every night. But sometimes, maybe once a week, someone starts to sing. Usually when the fire burns low and the camp begins to settle. It starts soft, barely more than humming. Then a verse. A few broken lines of something old, something worn smooth by time. You don't always understand the words, but the tone cuts through the cold like firelight. Tonight it's an older man. His voice rasps like parchment, but he carries the tune well enough. It's not joyful, not exactly, but it's not sad either. It's the kind of song you imagine a blacksmith humming while working late. Something steady. Something to remind himself that the world still has rhythm. You lie there listening. Your hands are tucked into your sleeves. Your hood is pulled down over your eyes. and still the sound reaches you, melting into the ambient chorus of snores, coughs, shifting blankets, and the occasional fart that echoes off a nearby shield. Historical fact, medieval soldiers did sing in camp, especially during long stretches between battles. Music served as morale, ritual, and memory. Songs ranged from drinking tunes to religious hymns to folk ballads, often regional and shared from village to village. Crusaders brought with them the music of their homelands, and those melodies blended and evolved across the miles. Fringe trivia: there are a few rare mentions of snoring songs in travel accounts, tunes sung by the more restless members of camp not to wake others but to soothe themselves. It's not exactly a tradition, but a habit, like whistling in the dark, something to prove you're still human when your feet are numb and your stomach's empty. You shift in your straw nest and let the sound carry you. The fire near you has faded to red coals. A few sparks drift lazily up into the night. Someone near the singer grumbles, but no one tells him to stop. Not tonight. Not when the cold is gentle and the wind is quiet. Not when the sound of a voice is the only thing separating this camp from a graveyard. The song finishes. No applause, no words, just silence again. And then, right on cue, a massive snore erupts from somewhere behind you like a drunk ox blowing a trumpet. It cuts the silence in half. Someone laughs softly. You smile against the inside of your cloak. Sleep wraps itself around you, not like a blanket, but like fog. It's not sudden. It creeps in gently. The sounds of camp continue as you fade. Coughs, shuffling, a whispered prayer. You hear someone nearby murmur something to their blanket, like they're telling it good night. You dream of a tavern, maybe one you've never actually visited. Long tables, warm fire, the smell of ale and roasting meat. Someone plays a lute in the corner. A woman hums the same tune the man sang earlier. You lean back in your chair and breathe in the warmth like a man might drink light. And then you're back in camp, half awake again. The sky is black with a hint of grey at the edges. Someone farts audibly, someone else curses them out. The balance is restored. There's scholarly discussion, especially among sociologists, about the communal soundscape of medieval camps. The theory is that noise, even disruptive noise, formed a kind of safety net. Silence could be unnerving, a sign of death, emptiness, danger. But noise, snoring, prayers, arguments, meant life, motion, community. And in these cold, ragged clusters of bodies and blankets, sound became a kind of armour against despair. You believe it. Even the awful noises have become part of your rhythm. You fall asleep counting the snores of the men around you like sheep. 1, 2, a gurgle, a groan, a quiet chant. Some nights you wish you had a lullaby to sing to, but your throat is dry and your voice feels far away. So instead, you close your eyes and let the camp sing for you. The wind changes. You feel it in the middle of the night, slicing through the camp with a new kind of teeth. Sharper, colder, deliberate. It's not just another chill evening. This is the beginning of winter. Real winter. The kind that doesn't just threaten, it moves in. You wake up with your blanket stiff from frost, your boots crusted with a thin shell of ice, and your breath visible in thick, slow clouds. Every surface around you sparkles like it's been glazed in glass. Beautiful, sure, but also terrifying. It's not even fully dark anymore when the cold becomes unbearable. The fire's been burning all evening, but it can't keep up. Every log devoured in minutes. Coals hiss and collapse under the weight of wind. You're out of dry kindling. Everyone is. By now, the camp looks like a hive of slow-moving shadows, hunched figures stumbling from one pile of smouldering ash to another, desperate to find just a little warmth. You weren't built for this. None of you were. Most of the men came from climates where winter meant damp days and the occasional frost on the fields. Not this, not endless wind, not stone-hard ground and fires that die like old dogs. So now, instead of marching during daylight and camping at night, the routine flips. You walk through the night, trying to stay warm through movement, and sleep in staggered shifts during the day, when the sun at least pretends to offer heat. The night becomes the enemy now, not a time for rest, a time for retreat from sleep itself. Historical fact: during the winter months of certain crusade campaigns, particularly in Eastern Europe and the mountains of Anatolia, armies shifted their schedules to march under the stars and sleep by sun. It was a desperate adaptation, but often the only way to avoid freezing in place. Frostbite, respiratory infections, and death by exposure were leading causes of attrition long before battle ever claimed them. You remember the first time someone suggested the idea, marching at night. Half the camp groaned, but when the cold turned your fingers blue, no one objected the second time. Tonight, you're walking, not far, just pacing a short stretch near the fire pits, stomping your feet to keep the blood flowing. Others do the same. It's like a grim parade of exhaustion. Shoulders slumped, faces hidden beneath hoods, teeth clenched. Every step is a protest against nature. Your cloak sticks to your neck, your knees are stiff, but at least you're moving. You pass a man who's standing completely still, arms wrapped around his chest. You say his name, then nudge him. Nothing. He jerks awake suddenly, eyes wide, and starts muttering a prayer. He almost fell asleep standing up, you understand, you're barely staying awake yourself. And it's not just the cold, it's the fear of the cold and that quiet dread always hovering, whispering if you sleep wrong tonight you won't wake up. It's in every cautious glance toward the fire, every layer of wool tied tighter, every breath you take fogging the air with anxious vapour. You try to sleep during the day now. The sun helps slightly. You nestle down into your bedroll just before noon, when the light's brightest, hoping the ground has soaked in enough heat to matter. It rarely has. But you've started stuffing hot stones into your blanket, an old trick now turned routine. You take them from the fire just before lying down, wrap them in thick cloth and wedge them between your knees or at your feet. They last an hour, maybe two before fading, but it helps. Every degree matters. Fringe fact, some soldiers, especially veterans, carried fire bags, simple leather pouches lined with fabric where they'd store coals or heated stones for slow release of warmth. A crude invention, but effective. You've thought about making one. But leather's scarce, and every scrap you have is already patching your boots. There's a scholarly debate over whether winter was truly the deadliest time on Crusade, or whether it just felt that way because it stretched so long and killed so slowly. Battles were short, cold lingered, hunger didn't stab, it gnawed, sickness didn't strike, it slithered in. Some historians say it was the combination that broke morale. Cold by itself might not have killed so many, but cold plus hunger, plus fatigue, plus doubt, that's a different war. And yes, doubt. That creeping question you try not to say out loud. What if this isn't worth it? You tell yourself it is, that Jerusalem will be the reward, that heaven is waiting, that your suffering is sacred. But when your boots freeze to the ground and your fingers bleed from cracks that won't heal, the promise starts to feel far. You trudge back to camp just as the fire's been rebuilt. Someone's managed to trade for kindling, maybe from a nearby village, maybe from a chapel's broken pews. No one asks. The flames spit and dance again. You hold your hands to it. You close your eyes. You pretend this moment can stretch just a little longer. But the fire is greedy. It wants more. It's never enough. You gather your things, your blanket, your cloak, your straw bedding if it hasn't blown away. You fold yourself into a new sleeping position. Closer to others now, tighter than ever. Every inch matters. The guy next to you has bad breath and snores like a drowning ox, but you press into his side like he's your own brother. You sleep in small sips. 20 minutes here, a half hour there. You wake every time the wind changes. Every time someone coughs or shifts, you wake to check your toes, your hands. You pinch yourself. You breathe into your collar and count the heartbeats. And somehow you keep waking. You're not resting, not really, but you're surviving. Barely. And right now, that's enough. You don't usually put much faith in trinkets. When the journey began, you saw men stringing up charms like armour, wooden crosses, carved saints, bits of hair wrapped in cloth, teeth tied on leather thongs. One man wore a rosary around his neck made entirely of dried berries. You rolled your eyes then. Back when you still had energy for that kind of thing. But now you sleep every night with a small, smooth stone tied into the hem of your cloak. It's nothing special, not at first glance. Just a thumb-sized pebble, rounded by river water, grey with a single white stripe through the middle. You picked it up weeks ago during a crossing, intending to throw it. But when your fingers closed around it, you just didn't let go. It stayed in your pocket for a while. Then one night, after a particularly bad cold spell, you tied it into your cloak before bed. No real reason, just a gesture. Now you don't sleep without it. Does it help? Who knows? You haven't frozen to death yet. That's enough evidence for now. Around camp, these small rituals are everywhere. A man whispers the same words every night before curling into his bedroll. Another rubs a coin until his fingers go raw. One woman wears a faded strip of linen around her wrist, maybe from a child's blanket or a lover's sleeve. You never ask. No one does. You respect the ritual, however strange. Tonight, as you lie back against your pack, you touch the stone through the fabric. Just a press of your thumb. It's not prayer, it's habit. Or superstition. Or maybe something older than saints and relics. Kind of deep human longing for protection in a world that keeps proving it doesn't care. Historical fact, crusaders often carried religious charms, tokens, or items believed to protect them during travel. Crosses, fragments of scripture, relics from saints, real or imagined, were common. While church leaders occasionally warned against idol worship, they also blessed these objects. Hedging their bets like everyone else, people needed something to hold on to. And here's your fringe detail. Some pilgrims went a step further and carried what they called sleeping charms, pieces of iron, knotted cords, or verses written in wax that were tucked into bedding or hung above their heads at night. These were meant not only to keep away sickness and demons, but also nightmares. After all, what was more dangerous than the things that crept in when your body couldn't move? You don't know if your stone qualifies. It's never spoken to you. It doesn't glow or pulse. But you slept with it pressed to your chest during that windstorm 2 weeks ago, and you woke up warmer than you expected. Coincidence? Maybe. But again, still alive. You stretch your legs under your blanket and glance around. Others are settling in. The firelight dances across their faces, casting strange shadows. One man is whispering the Lord's Prayer. Another is threading a piece of knotted twine through his fingers, like he's counting sins or memories. There's something about this hour, the way it softens even the hardest faces. You lie back and breathe in. The air is cold, sharp but manageable. For once you feel tired enough. You pull your hood low, wrap your arms around yourself and tuck your knees in tight. The ground is dry, your makeshift mattress of pine branches still holding its shape from yesterday. It's the best you'll get. You press your thumb against the stone again and close your eyes. You dream of your childhood bed. The wooden one with the creaky frame and the wool mattress your mother stuffed by hand. The candle flickers on the table. Your sister sings from the other room, and for a moment the dream feels realer than anything you've touched in weeks, realer than sand, than steel, than the march. You wake to coughing, someone hacking up a lung 3 bodies over. You roll over and try to drift back, but your mind is buzzing now. The fire's nearly out, the cold is back, you reach for the stone again. There's debate among scholars about the power of belief in non-sanctioned objects during the Crusades. Some argue that faith, even if misplaced, provided real comfort and helped men survive. Others believe it was nothing more than distraction, delaying the inevitable. But you know this. When your fingers tighten around that little stone, your heart slows just a little. Your breath evens out. You feel something, and out here, that's enough. You lie still for another hour. Maybe more. You don't move except to shift your weight or tuck your cloak tighter around your shoulders. The ground is harder tonight. Or maybe your bones are just older. But the stone is there, pressed near your chest where you can't feel the cold quite as much. You wonder what your family would say if they saw you now. Would they laugh at your stone? Or would they nod, quiet and understanding, and hand you a second one for luck? You whisper something, not a prayer, not exactly. Just a few words you used to say when you were sick as a child. You don't even remember where you learned them, but they sound good in the dark. You close your eyes, and you wait for sleep to come. You wake up to your own shivering. Not the kind you can shake off with a stretch and a deep breath. No, this is deep shivering. The kind that makes your teeth chatter and your muscles clench like fists. It feels like your body's trying to fold in on itself, some primal reflex kicking in to conserve heat you don't even have. Your blanket's still wrapped around you, your cloak too, but it's not enough. Not tonight. The wind picked up in the early hours. You can hear it now, dragging across the camp like claws raking through dried bones. It gets into everything, under tents, between cracks in boots, up sleeves and down collars. It doesn't care how thick your wool is or how tightly you're wrapped. It will find you, and when it does, it takes its time. You sit up slowly, your joints clicking like old hinges. Your fingers are stiff. Your lips feel cracked. You touch your nose and can't quite tell if it's still attached. Across from you, a man is rubbing his feet like he's trying to start a fire with them. His eyes are half closed. Half closed, the whites showing pink. No one's really awake, not fully, just floating in that dazed, half-conscious state that hovers between misery and survival. You need heat. You shuffle over to the dying fire pit. There's not much left. Just some glowing coals buried under a mound of ash. Someone's already started rebuilding it, placing twigs and splinters on top and blowing gently. You join him. Neither of you speaks. Words take energy. Energy is expensive. You crouch beside the embers and cup your hands like a prayer. Historical fact, fire maintenance was one of the most essential and stressful duties in medieval camps during cold seasons. Fires required constant tending. Without modern matches or lighters, reigniting a flame from scratch could be a long, painful process. That's why soldiers took turns keeping the embers alive through the night, using ashes to insulate the heat and feeding in kindling at intervals. Eventually, the fire comes back to life. Slowly, grudgingly, the twigs catch and crackle. Then the first small flame blossoms, like a timid flower. The man beside you nods once and you feed it more, careful not to smother it. You blow. It hisses. It grows. Fire changes everything. You hold your hands out just inches from the licking flames. They tingle as feeling returns, painful at first, then glorious. You turn them over, warming the backs, then your wrists, then press them briefly against your cheeks. The warmth feels almost holy. There's a strange rhythm to the way heat moves through a camp. One fire catches, then another. People stir. Someone throws on a fresh log and kicks up sparks. Soon there are half a dozen little fires across the clearing, all glowing, all spreading light and life. It's like watching stars blink on in the middle of the earth. You stay close to the flames. Not too close, you've learned that lesson. Burned wool is a terrible smell, but close enough to feel it seeping into your skin, baking the cold out of your bones. You stretch your legs toward it. You even pull off one boot just to let the heat reach your foot. It's damp inside. You knew it would be. Everything gets damp eventually. You set the boot near the fire, balancing it on a rock. Fringe fact, some crusaders became so obsessed with drying their boots that they carried special wooden racks to prop them over the fire. Of course, more than a few fell asleep and woke to smoking leather or worse, flames licking at their toes. There were no fireproof materials out here. Everything burned. And once a fire got loose in a tent, goodbye supplies, goodbye shelter. You sip something warm. One of the cooks is making a rough broth, water, a bone, some foraged herbs. You don't ask what's in it. It's hot. That's enough. You hold the cup with both hands and breathe in the steam like it's incense. Your eyes sting a little, but you let them. The heat loosens everything. Your jaw, your spine, your frozen thoughts. You realise you haven't spoken to anyone in over a day. You're not sure why. Maybe you forgot how. Or maybe the cold just stripped the words away. But now, with the fire crackling and steam curling from your cup, someone speaks. Better than yesterday, you turn. It's the same man who helped revive the fire. His voice is hoarse but steady. You nod. Little better, you say. Your own voice surprises you. Thin, unused. He stirs the fire with a stick. Storm's past, I think. You both look up at the sky. Pale blue bleeding into the horizon. No clouds, no wind, at least for now. You can almost imagine warmth returning. Almost. There's an ongoing scholarly debate about how much weather shaped the failure or success of Crusader campaigns. Some argue the cold was a background detail, never decisive. Others say that entire sieges, entire armies, collapsed under bad weather alone. Disease, frostbite, hypothermia. They didn't make the ballads, but they ended as many lives as the blade. You believe the latter, because you've seen it. Men who died not from arrows, but from sleeping too far from the fire. Men who never woke up after a snow-heavy night. There's no glory in freezing to death. No songs, just silence and stiff fingers. You finish the broth and place the cup beside your boot. Your cloak still stinks of smoke and sweat, but it's dry for now. You pull it tighter and sit in the golden arc of the fire's heat, letting the warmth carry you a few feet further from the edge of misery. Your fingers flex without pain. You might sleep again soon, maybe. For now, you're alive. For now, the fire is burning. You've stopped asking how many days it's been. Counting doesn't help anymore. You measure time now by the wear in your boots, the patches on your blanket, the new aches that appear in your joints like uninvited guests, and the cold, always the cold. You can tell what hour it is just by how sharp it feels. Mornings slice, evenings bite, nights gnaw. But today, something's different. It starts with bird song. Not the desperate cause of scavengers circling over dead things, but a real bird. Light. rhythmic, almost cheerful. You blink awake in confusion, eyes crusted, breath fogging. You sit up and listen, and there it is again. A chirp, a call, then two. You can't remember the last time you heard more than wind and groaning and distant boots. The frost is still on the grass, silvering the blades like spilled sugar, but the air, it doesn't sting. You breathe deep, and for once it doesn't hurt. You feel it down to your lungs, but it's not a punch. Just air. Cold, yes, but mercifully normal. You stand slowly, joints creaking. The fire has burned down, but you don't rush to rebuild it. Your fingers aren't shaking. You take a few steps, stretch your arms, across the camp. Others are doing the same, sitting up, moving, smiling, not just from survival, but from something better. Today is warmer. Not warm, but warmer. Enough to make you believe, just for a moment, that winter might loosen its grip. You find yourself taking deeper breaths, standing taller. Even your blanket feels lighter, not because it is, but because you aren't afraid of what's coming tonight. Historical fact: seasonal shifts were deeply significant to Crusader forces. Winter decimated morale, slowed movement, and created logistical nightmares. The arrival of early spring, or even a single mild day, was treated with reverence. It meant recovery. It meant planning could begin again. It meant that maybe, just maybe, they would keep going. You walk to the edge of camp, hands behind your back like some aging officer surveying his troops. Except your troops are mostly men asleep on rocks and goats trying to eat each other's bedding. Still, everything looks different in this light. The trees nearby have begun to drip meltwater. The snow isn't hard-packed anymore. It's slushy, streaked with mud and grass. One man near you stoops to wring out his socks and laughs when steam rises from them. That's how dry the air is. Steam. You find a stump and sit. The sun, yes, the sun, filters through the canopy in slow golden beams. You take off your boots just to air your feet. You wouldn't dare on most days, but today they need light. They need to breathe. The skin's red, cracked, but not bleeding. You rub your ankles and watch two small birds flutter near the edge of the clearing, pecking at crumbs someone dropped yesterday. One of the younger recruits walks past and says, "It's not so bad now, eh?" You nod, that's all, just a nod. No need to ruin it with words of there's a fringe fact from a Crusader's letter, one that never made it into the glory books. He describes a morning just like this. After weeks of snow and wet wool, he wakes to warmth. He says the camp sang that day. Sang because of the weather. No victory, no feast, just a morning when they could stretch without pain. You don't sing, but later, when someone starts plucking a tune on a lyre stringed with horsehair, you don't tell him to stop. You let it play. Let it tangle with the birdsong and the chatter of men finally talking again. Real words. Not grunts and curses. Conversations. Laughter even. The mood isn't cheerful exactly, but it's no longer defeated. It's something lighter. Something awake. There's debate among modern historians about how much weather impacted long-term strategy during the Crusades. Some say it was everything, others say it was merely one more obstacle like poor maps or bad leadership. But ask any soldier, ask you and you'll tell them plain, cold can kill your body, yes. But what it really goes for first is your spirit. And today you've got some of that spirit back. You gather your things slowly, air out your blanket, knock the frost off your boots, shake your cloak even though you know it'll smell like sweat and goat. Doesn't matter. It dries better in sunlight. You see others doing the same, hanging clothes on branches, rubbing hands together, without the frantic desperation of the last few weeks. The camp begins to look less like a graveyard and more like a village. People aren't just surviving. They're preparing. For what, you don't know, but it's enough. You spend the afternoon rewrapping your bedroll, laying fresh pine needles under your sleeping spot. A luxury. Normally you wouldn't waste time with that. But today, you do. Because tonight, you want to sleep, not just endure. When evening comes, the cold returns, but it is gentler. Like a breath on the back of your neck, not a blade down your spine. The fire burns longer, higher. You share a bit of food with a man who gave you nothing last week. He offers his thanks, quietly. That's enough. You crawl into your blanket, still warm from the afternoon sun, and lie down on the padded nest you made earlier. Your feet are dry, your fingers no longer ache. You press your hand over your cloak's hem, feeling the small stone tied inside. Still there, still alive. You fall asleep before the stars even finish arriving, and you don't wake once. You never thought you'd miss snoring, but now, lying in near total silence, it actually bothers you. No coughs, no muttered prayers, not even a shuffle of feet or the soft clang of armour being adjusted. Just quiet, thick, muffled and unnatural. The fire burns low beside you, flickering orange against the canvas of the clouds. But it's not comforting, it feels like a warning. The kind of calm that presses its fingers against your throat and says, wait for it. You sit up, slowly. Your body doesn't want to. Your knees protest, your spine clicks like an old chest opening. But you move anyway, something's off. Across camp, others are awake too, not many. Just a few shadowy shapes like you, rising from bedrolls, scanning the dark as if expecting to see something creeping in at the edges, and then, almost as if the wind's been holding its breath this whole time, it starts to move again, low and fast, rolling through the trees in strange circling gusts. You pull your cloak tighter. The air's not just cold anymore, it's wet, heavy with moisture, like a storm you didn't see coming. You hear someone curse and scramble to cover a pile of firewood. A pot clatters, the flames in the nearest pit stutter and hiss. Then the first drop hits your face. Rain. No, not just rain. Cold rain. Icy, sleeting sheets that don't fall straight but blow sideways, soaking you before you even think to get up. In a moment, your blanket is damp, your bedroll too. The straw beneath you squelches like a sponge. Everything that had finally dried out over the past warm day is now soaked again. The brief taste of comfort stolen with no apology. Historical fact, sudden storms were notorious during Crusader campaigns, especially in higher elevations and unfamiliar terrain. Entire camps were known to fall into chaos when heavy rain hit without warning. With no waterproofing and limited shelter, even a brief storm could undo weeks of recovery. Tents collapsed. Fires died. Illness spread. You rushed to pull your things together, not to stay dry, too late for that, but to keep them from becoming wetter. Your blanket, your boots, your few food scraps. You jam them all under your cloak, shielding them like precious relics. Around you, the camp erupts in groggy panic. Men flail in the dark, grabbing cloaks, shouting at the sky like it might care. And still, no one speaks in full sentences. Just growls, grunts. One man yells at his own bedroll. Someone else starts laughing, bitter and wild, like he's finally cracked. You find a small dip in the earth, tucks near a fallen log and huddle there. Not because it's smart, because it's all that's left. The log blocks some of the wind, and you press your back against it, teeth chattering, heart pounding in that slow, dull rhythm that fear tends to ride. You wish you could say this is the worst of it. It's not. You've seen worse. You've lived worse. But it's something about the timing that cuts deep. Just when you started to believe the worst had passed. Just when you laid down thinking, I might sleep tonight. That's when the sky reminded you, no. You squeeze your eyes shut, grit your teeth, and try to ride it out. Fringe fact. Some crusaders swore storms were signs from God, punishment, warnings, or tests of faith. A few even carried carved charms of Noah's Ark, believing they'd bring calm in bad weather. One account tells of a man who sang hymns into the rain until he passed out from fever. You're not that dramatic, but in this moment you understand why he tried. Time moves strangely when you're soaked. Every second feels like an hour, each gust of wind another hammer blow to your soul. You wrap your arms around your knees, bury your face in your hood, and hum a tune you don't remember learning. It keeps your teeth from clattering too loudly, keeps your thoughts from spiralling out into that terrible question. How much more can I take? There's scholarly debate about what broke Crusaders first, the body or the mind. Some say the real damage came when men started hoping less, when the things stopped looking forwards, when they started treating survival as a habit instead of a goal. Tonight, you toe that line. You haven't lost hope, but you've certainly misplaced it. Somewhere between the warm afternoon and the cold slap of now. Eventually the rain lets up. Not entirely, but enough that you lift your head again. Enough to hear the fire being coaxed back to life nearby. You crawl toward it, dragging your damp blanket behind you like a wounded animal. A few others are already there. No one talks. You sit shoulder to shoulder with them, staring into the flames like it might answer something. One man offers you a cup. Not wine, not beer, just water. You take it anyway. You drink. And for a moment, the warmth from the fire creeps up your legs, into your fingers, into your chest. You survived another night. That's all. But sometimes that's everything. And now, after 30 nights in the dirt, beneath flickering stars and merciless clouds, you lie still and listen to the quiet hum of survival. Not the triumph you were promised, Not the glory carved in stone back home, just breath, just warmth, if you're lucky, just the simple stubborn stillness of being alive after another cold night. In the end, no one ever wrote poems about how a crusader curled his feet beneath his cloak to keep them from going numb. No one carved stained glass scenes of men drying socks over a sputtering fire, or feeding hot stones into their bedding like primitive stoves. There are no hymns to the patience it takes to wait for the sun while your stomach growls and your fingers bleed. But those were the battles that really mattered. Not fought with swords or banners, but with straw and smoke and sheer grit. Maybe tonight, for once, you sleep all the way through. Maybe no one coughs. Maybe the fire doesn't die out. Maybe you dream of your old bed, the one with the itchy wool and crooked frame. Maybe you even miss it. Maybe you wake up, stretch in the first light and feel, if only briefly, human again. So rest now. You've walked far, suffered much, survived more than you thought you could, and whether anyone sings songs about it or not, your story matters. You made it. You didn't freeze to death. And tomorrow, you'll rise again.